What if the very fabric of your reality isn't as solid as you think? For the next 3 hours, prepare to have your mind bent and your perceptions shattered as we journey through observational paradoxes that will fundamentally alter how you see the world around you. You might not look at a reflection, a clock, or even your own thoughts the same way again. Let's start with first. Observer effect distortion. Imagine looking at something so closely that the act of watching changes the very thing you wanted to understand. This is the paradox of the observer effect. At first glance, it sounds abstract, like a puzzle hidden inside physics, but it reaches far beyond laboratories. It touches psychology, memory, even the fragile way we understand our own reality. Every time you try to measure, to test, to capture something pure, the presence of your gaze distorts it. What you end up seeing is not the untouched truth, but a version shaped by your intrusion. It's as if reality performs differently once it knows you're watching. In physics, the observer effect is most famously tied to quantum mechanics. The double-slit experiment demonstrates this in haunting clarity. When particles like electrons are left alone, they behave like waves, spreading out and creating interference patterns as though they exist in many places at once. But the moment you try to measure which slit they pass through, they collapse into a defined path, behaving like solid particles. Observation forces them to choose. It is as if the universe only decides on reality once it realizes someone is looking. The act of measuring destroys the hidden possibilities, locking the system into a single outcome. What you see is not what would have been if you had not interfered. This is not just subatomic strangeness. In everyday life, the principle emerges in psychology. Think of the Hawthorne effect. Workers in a factory were studied to see if better lighting would increase productivity. Productivity did rise, but not because of the lighting. It rose because the workers knew they were being observed. Their behavior shifted under the invisible pressure of a watchful eye. Once the study ended, productivity faded back. The truth of their normal behavior was erased by the presence of the observer. This echoes in classrooms, in interviews, in any environment where people know they are being watched. Their actions bend, twist, and reshape themselves, leaving you with data that is not pure reality, but a distorted reflection. Even memory bends under observation. The moment you recall an event, you are not retrieving it like a file from a hard drive. You are reconstructing it, reshaping it through the lens of the present moment. Neuroscience shows that each act of remembering subtly rewrites the memory, like saving over an old document with edits you didn't intend. The more you observe your past, the further it drifts from what actually happened. What you hold in your mind may feel vivid and true, but it is already something else, distorted by the very act of calling it forth. Consider the courtroom witness who swears with conviction, only to be proven wrong by video evidence. Their confidence is not deceit, it is the result of observation's distortion. Each time they revisited their memory, it changed, solidifying into something that never truly existed. The observer effect doesn't just warp physics, it reshapes identity, altering who you believe you are by rewriting your own history. Even science itself, the great search for truth, is tangled in this paradox. The more precise the instrument, the more it interferes. Measuring the temperature of a drop of water changes its heat. Observing wildlife alters their behavior. Animals hide, flee, or posture under human eyes. Place a camera in a room, and the people inside no longer act as they would if they believed no one was watching. Every lens, every test, every recording leaves a fingerprint of distortion. What we call knowledge is never untouched. It is always a collaboration between the thing observed and the observer's presence. This raises an unsettling question. Is reality ever truly knowable? If every act of looking changes what is, then what is the authentic version of events? Is it the wave that collapses into a particle? The worker unstudied in the shadows? The memory before it was remembered? Or do those authentic states cease to exist the moment you try to confirm them? Perhaps truth lives only in the unseen, lost forever once a gaze falls upon it. And yet, there's a deeper twist. Without observation, nothing has meaning. A universe unobserved might remain in a haze of probabilities, unresolved and indifferent. To watch is to collapse possibility into reality, to bring form out of formlessness. But it comes at a cost: distortion. The raw, untouched thing is destroyed in the process of becoming known. In this sense, every truth you hold is also a sacrifice. You see, but never purely. You know, but never fully. To observe is both creation and destruction. The observer effect is not just a footnote in physics textbooks. It is the silent distortion woven into every act of looking, remembering, and knowing. It reminds you that what you see, what you measure, even what you believe you recall, is never the untouched truth. Reality bends the moment you reach for it. The act of watching ensures that the thing you watch is never the same again. And the haunting part is this: you can never step outside this loop. You are always the observer, and by observing, you forever change what you sought to understand. Quantum measurement collapse. Imagine reality not as something solid and certain, but as a haze of endless possibilities. Every particle, every photon, every atom exists not in one definite state but in a superposition, a shimmering cloud of all the things it could be. A particle is here, and it is there. It is moving left, and it is moving right. It carries spin up and spin down. The universe, at its smallest scale, is not a world of fixed outcomes, but of probabilities. Yet the instant we try to look, to measure, the cloud collapses. Reality is forced to choose. Out of all the infinite options, only one survives. This is the mystery of quantum measurement collapse, the act of observation itself reshaping the universe. To understand it, think of Schrödinger's cat, the infamous thought experiment. A cat inside a sealed box is connected to a quantum particle that has a 50% chance of decaying and triggering poison. Before the box is opened, the quantum system exists in both states. The particle has decayed and not decayed, and the cat is both alive and dead. It is only when someone opens the box, when observation occurs, that the wave of possibilities collapses into one reality. The cat is alive, or the cat is dead, but never both. The observer, in this paradox, becomes an executioner of infinite worlds, collapsing endless outcomes into just one thread of history. This collapse isn't just an abstract idea. It has been seen in experiments with electrons and photons. Fire a single electron through a pair of slits, and it behaves like a wave, creating an interference pattern as if it travels through both slits at once. But place a detector to check which slit it went through, and the interference vanishes. The electron now behaves like a particle, forced into a single path. The very act of measurement kills the wave of possibilities, rewriting the story. Without observation, the universe is fluid and ghostly. With it, reality becomes hard and definite. The question then becomes chilling. Is reality truly there when no one is watching, or does it only crystallize when consciousness gazes upon it? Some physicists argue that collapse is not physical but informational, that measurement does not kill possibilities, but simply updates our knowledge. Yet this does not erase the haunting fact: what we see is different depending on whether we observe. The universe behaves differently when watched. Imagine walking through a dark forest with countless paths branching off before you. As long as you don't choose, all paths exist. But the moment you step onto one, the rest dissolve. The collapse is that choice. Possibilities die, and only one road becomes your life. Every observation is a narrowing of the universe. Think about your own existence. Every breath you take exists against the backdrop of countless breaths you could have taken differently. Every decision collapses infinite alternate selves who might have lived another way. In quantum physics, the collapse is physical. In human life, it is psychological. But the essence is the same. Potential dies when reality solidifies. The branching of what could be is always larger than the narrow line of what is. Every act of looking, deciding, measuring, is a funeral for the futures that never arrived. This idea has led to interpretations that stretch beyond science into philosophy. The Copenhagen interpretation tells us the wave function, the mathematical ghost of possibility, collapses under observation. The many worlds interpretation argues something more terrifying. That collapse never happens. Instead, every possibility lives, branching off into parallel universes. In one, you looked left. In another, you looked right. In one, the cat lived. In another, it died. The collapse, in this view, is only the illusion of narrowing. Reality fractures endlessly, and you are merely one traveler through infinite copies of yourself, each choosing differently. But if collapse is real, then observation is violent. To observe is to eliminate. To measure is to destroy infinity. The cosmos is constantly murdered into a single truth by the gaze of the conscious mind. A photon could have scattered in countless directions, but your eye captures it, fixes it, reduces it. A superposition of worlds is cut down to one. And perhaps the most unsettling question is this: what is it about consciousness that causes this? Machines can measure. Detectors can record. But does collapse only truly complete when a conscious mind registers the result? Is reality dependent on awareness, or is it cold and mechanical, collapsing regardless of human witness? The debate remains unsettled, but the weight of the mystery presses inescapably on the human mind. Imagine this on a cosmic scale. The universe at its foundation is a haze of probabilities, stretching like a dream with endless branches. Every star, every atom, every flicker of light exists as possibility until the gaze of some observer, somewhere, forces it into shape. Perhaps reality is not an objective thing at all, but a negotiation between what could be and what is seen. Perhaps existence itself is participatory, requiring eyes to collapse it into form. If so, then every act of looking is a creative act, painting reality into being, while simultaneously destroying all other canvases that might have existed. And yet, there is tragedy in this act of creation. The collapse does not come gently. It is brutal. It discards infinite possibilities to allow one truth. It kills the unborn universes that might have been. Every photon observed is a silence of the ones that were not. Every decision made is a graveyard of the ones left behind. To live is to collapse your quantum potential into a thin thread of being. To measure is to accept that reality is only a survivor of infinite deaths. So, the next time you look at the world around you, at the glass on the table, the light on the wall, the sound of your own voice, consider this: those things exist not because they were destined, but because all other possibilities were killed when you observed them. Reality is not the fullness of what could be, but the aftermath of collapse. Existence is a narrowing, a distillation, a fragile choice among infinities. Every second you live is a victory of one outcome, and a burial of countless others. Reflection-driven reality shift. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You look at your reflection, expecting it to be a passive copy, nothing more than glass and silver reflecting back the surface of your body. Yet, something subtle stirs. The longer you look, the more you notice tiny adjustments. Your posture straightens, your facial expression shifts, even the way you breathe changes. This is not a trivial detail. Psychologists have found that the act of seeing yourself reflected back is not neutral. It reshapes how you think, how you act, and ultimately, how reality unfolds in the moments that follow. The mirror is not simply showing you what you are, it is influencing who you are about to become. Consider the phenomenon known as the mirror self-awareness effect. When you see yourself in a mirror, your brain enters a heightened state of self-recognition. Suddenly, you are not just existing. You are performing, even if no one else is in the room. Studies show that people placed in front of a mirror become more self-conscious, less likely to cheat on tasks, more aware of moral standards, and more careful with their decisions. Something as ordinary as glass, positioned at the right angle, can shift your behavior in measurable ways. Think about that. How many times in your life have you passed a reflection without realizing it nudged your choices, however slightly? The mirror also taps into something deeper: identity itself. In experiments with children, researchers observed that before the age of 2, they do not recognize their reflections as themselves. They may touch the glass or play with the image, believing it to be another child. But after that threshold, a new awareness emerges: the reflection is me. This developmental shift rewires the mind forever. Every time we encounter our reflection, it reinforces the delicate boundary between who we are inside and how we appear outside. And because this awareness is never neutral, each glance in the mirror is like a micro-recalibration of the self. Without even noticing, you might smile more, frown less, stand taller, or shift your tone of voice when you leave the room. But there's a paradox buried here. If the mirror changes your behavior, then the reflection you just saw was never really you. It was already a future version, influenced by the glass itself. In other words, the reality you were about to live gets altered by the act of reflection. Think about getting ready for an interview. Without a mirror, you may walk out the door unaware of your slouch or the shadow of doubt in your eyes. With a mirror, you straighten up, adjust your expression, and enter the world differently. That simple feedback loop doesn't just change your appearance. It shifts the trajectory of events to follow. A different impression, a different conversation, a different chain of outcomes, all set in motion by a glance at your reflection. Consider another example. In psychology, the mirror exposure effect has shown that people who spend more time looking at themselves become more self-regulating, but also more vulnerable to harsh self-criticism. A reflection can either empower you, reminding you of control, or it can imprison you, magnifying flaws and insecurities. The same piece of glass can give you the confidence to face the world or the doubt to withdraw from it. Which outcome you live depends not only on what you see but how you interpret it, and that interpretation ripples into reality. If you believe the reflection shows weakness, you may unconsciously act timidly throughout the day. If you believe it shows strength, you may project authority and certainty. Both versions of reality stem from the same moment of reflection, branching into different futures. Now imagine the larger consequences. Entire cultures have understood mirrors not as neutral tools but as portals, symbols, even threats. Ancient legends describe mirrors as gateways to the soul, devices that could capture essence or reveal truths hidden from ordinary sight. In folklore, breaking a mirror meant 7 years of bad luck, not because of superstition alone but because the reflection was seen as deeply tied to fate itself. Even in modern times, many spiritual practices use mirrors as tools of meditation, staring into your own eyes until the boundary between self and reflection begins to dissolve. In that dissolution, people report profound shifts, a sense of seeing another presence, a stranger within, or a deeper self hidden below the surface. Science calls this the strange face illusion, where prolonged mirror gazing causes distortions and hallucinatory changes in the face. What does that tell us? That perception of self is fragile, and that mirrors are not passive. They are active participants in shaping the reality of who you are. This brings us to the unsettling realization. When you stand before a mirror, you are no longer just living. You are rewriting. Each glance forces a negotiation between how you imagine yourself and how you appear. That negotiation alters behavior, and behavior alters reality. If you had not looked, your day may have unfolded one way. Because you did, it unfolds another. The mirror does not just show you, it shifts you. It edits your next words, your next gestures, your next choices. And when you consider how many reflective surfaces we encounter daily, bathroom mirrors, shop windows, darkened screens, the influence of reflection-driven shifts becomes vast, nearly inescapable. Reality, then, is not only shaped by events, but by the silent dialogue between self and reflection. So the next time you see yourself in the glass, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this truly me, or is this the version that the mirror is creating, the one that will walk out and shape the world differently? The reflection you see is already editing the life you are about to live. And in that sense, every mirror you face is a fork in the road. One path leading to the person you might have been without it, and another into the self that reflection has sculpted, a self stepping into a reality that could not have existed otherwise. Camera presence bias. Imagine this. The moment a camera is turned on, reality itself shifts. The people in frame straighten their posture, change the tone of their voice, choose their words differently. The presence of that silent eye forces them to rewrite themselves. What is captured is not the truth of what would have happened, it is a new reality, sculpted by awareness. This is camera presence bias, the strange distortion that recording devices create when the act of being watched becomes part of the event itself. What we preserve as history is not raw memory, but a performance, a fragment shaped by self-consciousness, by fear, by vanity, by the strange gravitational pull of the lens. Think about the Hawthorne experiments in the 1920s. Workers in a factory were observed under different conditions, lighting, breaks, pay, and researchers tried to measure how these factors affected productivity. But the results were warped. No matter the conditions, workers changed their behavior simply because they knew they were being studied. Replace the clipboard with a camera, and you see the same principle amplified. Recording doesn't just capture life, it alters it. A wedding video is not the wedding as it was lived. Guests speak louder, smile wider, toast more dramatically. The camera doesn't passively document. It commands a stage, and the participants perform. This happens in small ways too. A child playing in a room might sing nonsense to themselves, lost in imagination. The moment a parent raises a phone to record, the child's behavior shifts. They glance at the lens, self-correct, sometimes even stop. The authentic moment disappears. In its place, a new one begins, the child's awareness of being remembered. What is preserved on that file isn't pure memory. It's a version shaped by the fact it was meant to be preserved. The past is rewritten in real time. Even in darker moments, the bias shows its hand. Police body cameras, installed to ensure accountability, change not just how officers act, but how citizens behave in encounters. Sometimes this restraint prevents harm. Other times it escalates tension, because both sides know an unseen audience is watching. The record is no longer neutral. It becomes a performance to persuade future viewers, lawyers, judges, the public. And history itself is reshaped. What might have been an informal conversation becomes rigid, cautious, staged for the archive. Reality has been forced into a new script. Social media pushes this distortion into overdrive. Think about how people act when they know a clip might go viral. Arguments in public are shouted louder, dances in bedrooms are rehearsed harder, tragedies are sometimes prolonged because someone wants to make sure the moment is captured. We no longer live just for ourselves or for those present. We live for a potential audience that doesn't yet exist but might someday scroll across our lives. That imagined gaze reshapes the event itself. Reality is filtered, selected, exaggerated. And in the end, the recording doesn't just show history, it manufactures it. But the deeper danger is subtle. We trust recordings as evidence, as windows into truth. Courtrooms, documentaries, newsreels, they all lean on footage as if it were neutral. Yet every video has already been corrupted by the fact it was filmed. Imagine a protest where cameras are present. Chants grow sharper, anger grows louder, and even silence becomes a pose for the lens. If the camera had not been there, the event would not have unfolded the same way. The footage doesn't lie about what happened, it lies about what would have happened. And we forget that distinction when we call it truth. Even our private lives are distorted. Tourists who once marveled quietly at monuments now hold phones out, narrating as if for an audience, curating their awe for future playback. Parents who might have comforted a child first reach for the record button, creating a clip rather than a memory. The act of recording inserts a third party into every interaction. The audience, invisible but present, shaping every gesture. We live as if always half on stage, half aware that history is being sculpted around us. And so, history itself becomes suspect. When future generations look back on our era, what will they see? Billions of hours of footage, each one altered by the lens. They will believe they are seeing us as we were, but they will never know who we would have been if no one was watching. They will inherit a false history, not because we meant to lie, but because we couldn't help but perform. Reality bent around the camera, and the distortion became the archive. Camera presence bias is not just a trick of psychology, it is a rewriting of existence. A wedding vow whispered differently because it's being filmed is not the same vow. A fight escalated for the lens is not the same fight. The child who stops singing when the phone appears loses a moment that can never be recovered. Every recording erases one world and creates another. And when we replay it, we forget the erased version ever existed. So ask yourself, how much of your life has been lived for the lens? How many of your memories are not what happened, but what the camera demanded? Every time you watch old footage, you are not revisiting reality. You are revisiting a performance. You are seeing a life bent around the silent, watchful eye that changed everything simply by existing. Perhaps that is the final paradox of our age. The more we record, the less we will ever truly know of what was real. Attention gravity field. Imagine reality itself as a vast field of shifting probabilities, countless outcomes flickering in potential, waiting to be chosen. Within this field, your attention functions like gravity. What you focus on begins to bend toward you, as if the act of observation pulls invisible threads of probability into alignment. The simple act of focusing doesn't just describe reality, it begins to shape it. And this is not just metaphor. Across psychology, neuroscience, and even quantum physics, evidence suggests that where we place our attention alters the outcomes we are most likely to experience. Think of the driver who becomes hyper-aware of red cars after buying one. Suddenly, they seem to flood the streets, as though the world shifted to accommodate this awareness. This isn't merely coincidence. Attention acts as a filter, amplifying certain signals while muting others. In doing so, the brain builds a version of reality that feels objective but is deeply biased toward the focus we hold. What once was background noise becomes the dominant melody, and this altered perception guides choices, actions, and responses in ways that increase the probability of those outcomes actually unfolding. Psychologists call this the frequency illusion or the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Once something enters your awareness, your neural networks heighten sensitivity to its presence, tuning out competing data. In practice, this means that when you repeatedly think of failure, your brain sharpens its ability to detect and collect evidence of failure, reinforcing the likelihood of decisions and behaviors that bring it into being. The same applies to success, resilience, or opportunity. Your mind becomes a prediction engine that biases reality toward what it expects, powered by the gravitational pull of attention. Consider experiments in quantum mechanics, where particles behave differently when measured. In the famous double-slit experiment, the presence of an observer changes the outcome of the particle's path. While physics doesn't claim human thought creates matter, the eerie parallel remains. Observation collapses possibility into actuality. Similarly, in human experience, attention collapses a vast spectrum of potential realities into one lived outcome. Focus is the lens through which probability hardens into memory. On a more tangible level, think of athletes visualizing their performance. Countless studies show that deliberate mental focus on execution can improve real physical outcomes. By rehearsing the act in the mind, they prime neural circuits, making success more likely. The gravity field of attention begins to shape muscle memory, decisions under pressure, and confidence in execution. What was once only imagined becomes embodied, because the focus itself bent reality toward it. But there is a darker side. Attention can trap. Obsessing over fears can magnetize them, not because thought magically creates disaster, but because fixation alters choices, heightens stress, and blinds you to alternatives. A person afraid of rejection may project hesitation that invites it. Someone convinced of betrayal may interpret every gesture as proof, eroding trust until betrayal indeed emerges. The gravity field is impartial. It amplifies whatever occupies the mind, whether constructive or destructive. In everyday life, this principle explains why two people in the same environment live in radically different realities. One focuses on scarcity, seeing only barriers, while another focuses on possibility, detecting pathways forward. Their environments are the same. Their outcomes diverge because their attentional gravity fields bend probability differently. Over time, attention doesn't just reflect reality. It builds it, one perception, one decision, one outcome at a time. So when you catch yourself pulled into patterns of thought, whether toward hope or despair, growth or stagnation, understand that this is not a trivial process. Each moment of focus is like casting gravity in a particular direction. You are bending the invisible fabric of probability. And though you may not control everything, you control what you attend to, and in doing so, you participate in the selection of what becomes real. The universe does not merely happen to you. It is drawn, in subtle but undeniable ways, toward the places where your mind lingers. That is the paradox of the attention gravity field. It is invisible, intangible, yet it quietly steers the unfolding of your life. By choosing where to look, you choose what becomes possible. And what you cannot see, no matter how real, may never arrive, simply because it was denied the pull of your focus. Remote viewing ripple. Imagine looking across vast space, your body unmoving, your hands untouched, your voice silent. You think you are only watching, only receiving light, only taking in a scene that exists independent of you. But what if your gaze is not passive? What if to see something from afar is to press against it ever so slightly, like wind brushing against still water? This is the haunting possibility of what we might call the remote viewing ripple, the idea that perception itself radiates influence, that your awareness pushes outward like invisible waves, altering what it touches, however faintly. Physics has already shown us that observation is never neutral. In the quantum double-slit experiment, when we look at a particle to determine its path, the act of looking changes the outcome. The wave of possibilities collapses, and a single reality is chosen. The electron does not behave the same way when observed as when left alone. This means that measurement is not just a mirror, it is an intrusion. The very moment of awareness disturbs what was, leaving it forever different. Remote viewing ripple extends this mystery beyond the quantum lab, whispering that even silent awareness at a distance might exert subtle pressure, invisible but real. Think of the eerie sensation of being watched. People turn around in crowded streets without a sound, feeling the burn of eyes upon them. Soldiers on battlefields have reported sensing hidden snipers before spotting them. This strange intuition has no clear mechanism, yet it persists across cultures and centuries. Could it be that the act of watching radiates outward, not just collecting photons but pushing energy back, a subtle disturbance detectable in the nervous system of the one being observed? The ripple might be too small to register in machines, but life itself may be tuned to it. Now stretch the idea further. Imagine a remote viewer, someone trained to see across continents, across walls, across oceans. If their vision alone could stir the air of a place, even in microscopic ways, then what they perceive is not untouched. The very act of their looking makes the location different than it would have been otherwise. A candle flame flickers slightly, an insect changes its flight, a grain of dust shifts without reason. None of these would be traced back to the gaze, yet they belong to it. Reality itself is rewritten at the edge of attention. This thought grows heavier when applied to human history. What if mass attention, the collective gaze of millions, creates ripples that alter events? A moment of catastrophe broadcast across the world, billions of eyes focused upon it, might become heavier than it would have been unseen. Reality thickens under the weight of shared observation, reshaping itself in ways we do not measure but perhaps instinctively sense. To see is to change. To witness is to interfere. No place is the same after being looked at. And here lies the paradox. If watching disturbs, then we never know what reality is like without us. There is no neutral state of the world, no untouched truth waiting in silence. The moment our gaze falls, the ripple begins. We do not just receive information, we leave fingerprints, subtle and permanent. Every act of vision is both knowledge and violence, collapsing the untouched into the observed. So when you stare from afar, across a street, across a city, across a memory, you may believe you are only watching. But in some quiet, unsettling way, the world beneath your gaze is shifting. Your sight is a weight, your attention a pressure. To look is to touch. To see is to disturb. And nothing you witness is ever the same again. Spotlight phenomenon distortion. Imagine walking into a crowded room. Dozens of voices rise, glasses clink, footsteps shuffle across the floor, but your eyes, almost without permission, lock onto one person. A gesture, a glance, the way they tilt their head, and suddenly everything else disappears. The spotlight effect has taken hold. Observation doesn't just record reality, it distorts it. It singles out one detail, magnifies it, and leaves the rest in shadow. What becomes important is not necessarily the truth, but what your attention has chosen to illuminate. And once that spotlight burns into your mind, the rest of the scene collapses into irrelevance. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect because it's as if you are holding a flashlight in a dark theater. Whatever beam you cast becomes the story, the headline, the event. But the theater itself is still full, props, actors, whispers in the wings, all lost in shadow. When you believe everyone notices the pimple on your face, the stumble in your sentence, the awkward silence you left in a conversation, that is the spotlight distortion at work. Research shows most people barely notice. They are too busy trapped in their own spotlight, shining it inward. Yet the detail you observe in yourself feels blindingly bright, exaggerated, and defining. This distortion doesn't stop with self-consciousness. It shapes memory and history. A single detail can dominate how you recall an entire day. You may forget 99 moments of kindness, but remember the one cutting remark that struck you. The spotlight burns that insult into permanence, erasing the wider truth of the day. Entire relationships are often remembered not for years of complexity, but for a single betrayal, a single gift, a single word spoken at the wrong time. The spotlight doesn't just distort, it rewrites what reality means to you. In experiments, observers shown a crowded image with one highlighted detail consistently recalled that detail as central, even when it was meaningless. The brain does not passively record. It edits, it ranks, it builds importance where none may exist. That is the distortion. Your gaze creates a hierarchy of meaning, crowning one element king while the others vanish into the background. This is why advertising, politics, and even courtroom testimony exploit the spotlight effect. Draw the eye to one detail, and the story writes itself around it, whether or not it deserves such weight. But here's the darker truth. What is left unseen can be more important than what the spotlight shows. While you focus on the one person staring at you in a meeting, you miss the dozen who are indifferent. While you obsess over one flaw in your reflection, you fail to see the whole of your humanity. While historians elevate one battle, one leader, one speech, entire cultures and countless silent lives fade into obscurity. The spotlight makes reality lopsided. It convinces you that the brightest detail is the whole truth, when in fact it is only a fragment, magnified by attention. And yet, without this spotlight, the world might be unbearable. Too much detail is chaos. The mind must choose, must collapse the overwhelming into something graspable. So the spotlight becomes both a gift and a trap. It helps you survive by narrowing the field, but it deceives you into thinking the narrow field is the entire world. To live with awareness of this distortion is to constantly ask, what lies in the shadows outside my gaze? What truths am I ignoring because they are not illuminated? The spotlight phenomenon distortion is not just a quirk of perception, it is a silent editor of reality. It decides which parts of existence you believe matter and which dissolve into nothingness. The story of your life, the story of the world, is always told through this narrowing beam. And the haunting question remains: if everything else is fading into irrelevance while one detail burns too brightly, how much of what you think is truth is simply an illusion of where the spotlight fell? Thought projection loop. Imagine this. You think of something, a conversation, a failure, a triumph, a danger, and without realizing it, your thought plants a seed. That seed doesn't stay in your mind. It leaks into your gestures, your tone, your choices, and suddenly the world around you begins to shift to match it. Psychologists call this the self-fulfilling prophecy. What you expect, you prepare for. What you prepare for, you unconsciously act toward. And what you act toward, reality bends to deliver. Picture a student walking into an exam, silently repeating, "I'm going to fail." That thought changes how they hold the pen, how quickly they second-guess themselves, how their stress sabotages recall. The imagined failure becomes an actual one. Now reverse it. Another student whispers, "I can do this." Confidence steadies the hand, calms the breath, and recalls more knowledge than fear ever allowed. In both cases, imagination isn't passive, it's causal. Science has captured this in striking ways. In the 1960s, psychologists Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson conducted what's now called the Pygmalion effect. Teachers were told that certain students in their classroom had been identified as intellectual bloomers, expected to show rapid growth. In reality, the students were chosen at random. Yet by the end of the year, those same children had made significant gains in IQ and performance. Why? Because the teacher's expectations shaped their interactions. They smiled more, offered more challenges, gave more patience, and the children responded. The thought projected outward became a lived reality. The same loop appears in medicine. Placebo studies reveal that when a patient believes a pill will heal them, their body often responds as if it truly were medicine. Pain diminishes, symptoms ease, measurable physiological changes occur, not because of the pill's chemistry, but because of the mind's projection guiding the body's response. The imagined healing bends reality toward health. Even the nocebo effect, the opposite, shows the danger. Expect harm, and the body manifests harm. Expect relief, and the body manifests relief. Athletes know this intuitively. Visualization training is a cornerstone of elite performance. A diver rehearses every twist in the mind before stepping to the platform. A runner imagines the perfect stride, muscles firing in sequence. Neuroscientists confirm that imagining these actions lights up the same neural circuits as physically performing them. The body doesn't distinguish between thought rehearsal and lived rehearsal. The loop blurs them until imagination leaks into muscle, speed, and precision. Even daily interactions fall under its spell. Imagine walking into a room expecting rejection. Your shoulders slope, your eye contact falters, your voice tightens. Others sense withdrawal and respond with distance, confirming the rejection you feared. Now imagine the opposite. Expect welcome, and your body opens, your eyes hold steady, your tone invites warmth. People mirror back what you project, and reality loops accordingly. In each case, the imagined outcome quietly scripts the actual one. But here lies the paradox. The loop does not distinguish between hope and fear. Both are instructions. Imagine catastrophe often enough, and your micro-choices tilt toward it. Hesitations, mistrust, missed chances. Imagine possibility, and your behavior reaches for it. Risks taken, doors opened, hands extended. Every thought is not contained within you. It is cast forward like a thread into the world, pulling you subtly toward the scenario you rehearsed. Think of how many histories could be traced back to nothing more than projected thoughts. Revolutions fueled not just by anger, but by imagining a better order. Personal downfalls rooted not in fate, but in someone's certainty they were destined to fail. Whole realities, nations, families, lives, bent by loops of expectation. And this truth can be unsettling. Because if imagination guides reality, then you are never neutral. You are always rehearsing something: success, failure, connection, isolation, whether you notice or not. The loop is always running. Every thought is an instruction. Every projection is a rehearsal. You are programming a reality you have not yet lived. So pause for a moment and consider, what are you projecting? Every image in your mind is not locked inside. It is a sketch of the world you are steering yourself toward. Imagine enough failure, and your path narrows. Imagine enough courage, and your path expands. Imagine nothing at all, and you still drift into the loop of inertia, repeating the past because you projected no future. The loop never rests. Even silence in your head is still a shape of possibility. You are always imagining, and in that imagining, you are always creating. Every thought carries weight, every expectation is a seed, and every seed, if repeated, grows into the ground you walk upon. So the question is not whether you are shaping reality with your imagination. You already are. The real question is, what kind of reality are you rehearsing right now? Lens framing effect. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a crowded square. All around you, voices rise and fall, banners wave, and footsteps echo against the stone. Now imagine holding a camera and tilting the lens just slightly. Point it toward the shouting crowd, and the event looks like unrest, tension, even danger. Shift it instead toward a single child holding a flower, and the same gathering suddenly becomes a portrait of hope, of peace rising against the odds. The moment did not change, but its meaning has been rewritten by the frame. This is the lens framing effect, the subtle yet immense force of perspective that not only shapes how we interpret events, but changes the events themselves as they unfold. The frame does not just capture reality, it sculpts it, guiding human behavior, rewriting memory, and deciding what survives into history. Think about a courtroom. A trial is underway, and cameras are rolling. A defendant framed tightly in close-up appears nervous, sweating, perhaps even guilty. Widen the lens to show the heavy lights, the stern faces of the jury, and suddenly the same nervousness seems human, sympathetic, understandable. The frame manipulates not just the viewer, but also the participants. Knowing the camera focuses on them, they shift their posture, alter their words, play to the angle. The lens does not simply record truth, it manufactures a performance, and that performance becomes what the world believes actually happened. In this way, the act of framing changes the very event it attempts to document. History itself has been bent countless times by the frame. Consider wartime photographs. One famous image of a flag being raised can symbolize triumph, while another shot of bodies in rubble from the same battle tells a story of tragedy. Both are real, both happened in the same place, and yet the frame determines which narrative is carried into the collective mind. Soldiers may raise a flag more deliberately if they see cameras nearby, knowing the image will outlive the moment. Civilians may cry louder, march bolder, or remain silent, depending on what angle they realize the camera is capturing. The frame pulls people into its gravitational field, shaping their actions because they know how they will be seen. This happens in our personal lives as well, often without us realizing it. A family vacation at the beach might have been filled with arguments, traffic, exhaustion, and spilled drinks. Yet when the camera comes out, everyone lines up against the sunset, smiling as if none of the chaos existed. Later, when those pictures are revisited, the reality of stress fades, replaced by the framed illusion of happiness. The frame did not simply capture a moment, it rewrote the event, erasing one truth and preserving another. Years later, even the people who lived it will remember the vacation as the framed version, not the lived one. Memory itself becomes obedient to the lens. Think of social media, where framing is no longer just incidental but deliberate strategy. Influencers tilt their cameras to capture the perfect background, crop out the mess, and choose lighting that transforms ordinary routines into aspirational fantasies. Viewers see confidence, luxury, beauty, but often just outside the frame there are tangled wires, dirty dishes, or exhaustion hidden from sight. The event itself, the breakfast, the workout, the day out, changes entirely because of how it is framed. And for the influencer, living inside that frame becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They are forced to behave as the frame demands, until their actual life conforms to the curated one. But the lens framing effect can also be weaponized. Political rallies are framed tightly to show massive crowds, even if only a few hundred people are present. News outlets select camera angles to dramatize or to minimize conflict, depending on the story they wish to tell. An empty street filmed from one perspective may look calm and deserted, while from another angle the same street looks tense, brimming with riot police. Each frame tells a story that reshapes public perception, and through perception, reality itself bends. Citizens act on what they believe is happening, even if that belief is a product of framing rather than truth. The event and its interpretation collapse into one, inseparable and altered. Even art demonstrates this power. Filmmakers know that a close-up can transform an ordinary glance into a revelation, that shifting perspective from eye level to low angle can turn a person into a towering figure of authority. Audiences respond as if these manipulations reveal truth, but in fact they are choices, ways of guiding perception that change the meaning of every gesture. In documentaries, the choice of what to frame and what to exclude decides whether a subject is remembered as a hero, a villain, or something in between. The camera frame is never neutral. It is an author. At the heart of this effect lies a disturbing paradox. We believe frames reveal truth, when in reality they conceal just as much as they expose. What is outside the frame is dismissed, forgotten, erased. Yet those hidden details may have changed everything had they been included. A peaceful scene cropped away from looming danger is not peace, but denial. A violent moment framed without its context is not truth, but distortion. And once framed, the record stands as if it were reality itself. Future generations will inherit not the fullness of what happened, but the narrow slice chosen by the lens. Ask yourself, how many of your own memories are framed illusions? The smiling photos, the carefully cropped videos, the curated feeds, do they tell the truth of your life, or just the truth of the frame? When you look back, are you remembering what happened, or what the lens told you to remember? The unsettling reality is that framing doesn't just change how events are seen, it changes what events are. Because once framed, the alternative versions dissolve into nothingness, leaving only the perspective that was captured. The lens is not passive. It is a force that sculpts the very fabric of reality. The lens framing effect reminds us of a dangerous but unavoidable truth. There is no such thing as an objective record. Every image, every video, every memory is bent by the angle from which it was seen. The frame is an editor, a storyteller, a manipulator. And when we forget this, we risk living inside illusions we mistake for reality. Perhaps that is the greatest distortion of all, that what we believe to be truth was only one frame among infinite possibilities, each of which could have told a different story, each of which could have created a different world. Reciprocal observation effect. Imagine standing in front of someone, their eyes fixed on you. In that instant, something subtle but undeniable shifts inside you. You adjust your posture, change the rhythm of your words, perhaps even alter what you were about to do. Their presence modifies you. But look deeper. Your gaze, your attention, your subtle reactions are also shaping them. They respond not only to who they are, but to who they become under your observation. This is the reciprocal observation effect, a looping exchange where both sides continuously transform, not into who they were, but into who they are being seen as. It begins with the most basic level of human interaction. A child behaves differently under the watchful eyes of a parent. An employee shifts in the presence of a supervisor. A stranger on the street becomes more cautious, more aware, under another's stare. But here is the hidden complexity. While one side adjusts, so does the other. The parent modifies based on the child's response. The supervisor is influenced by the worker's nervousness. The stranger's movements alter the observer's perception. Both are trapped in an endless feedback cycle, spiraling deeper each second, shaping not only behavior but the unfolding reality itself. Psychology has long studied this dynamic. The Hawthorne effect revealed that workers improved performance simply because they were being studied. But researchers themselves were also altered. Expectations, interpretations, even judgments were shaped by the workers' responses. It wasn't one-sided. The act of observing became an invisible partnership where both sides moved away from their natural state and into a shared distortion. Observation doesn't just record reality. It creates a new one, woven from the feedback loops of perception. Even in ordinary conversation, the cycle reveals itself. When you lean in, the other leans in too. When you cross your arms, they may mirror you unconsciously. When you smile, they soften. These micro-responses are not isolated quirks. They are feedback signals that ripple endlessly. You become warmer because they reflected warmth, they become warmer because you responded, and so it continues until both are somewhere they would never have been alone. The cycle reshapes not only actions but identity itself. But here lies the paradox. No one in this loop is fully authentic. Who you are alone, unobserved, dissolves the moment eyes fall upon you, and the same dissolves in them. Together you enter a shared performance, a fragile theater where each glance, each twitch, each pause reshapes the script. It's not false, yet it's not pure truth. It is a third reality, one that exists only in the space between observer and observed. Consider the power this carries in larger contexts. Surveillance cameras don't just capture behavior, they change it. A person aware of the lens walks differently, thinks differently, chooses differently. And yet, those who review the footage are not immune. Their judgments, their decisions, their sense of authority are all molded by the behaviors on screen. A two-way loop, even when one side believes itself hidden. In politics, in media, in relationships, the cycle can magnify into vast networks of influence, each side altering the other without end. This reciprocal observation effect raises haunting questions. If we are always changing under the gaze of others, and they are always changing under ours, then where is the fixed self? Where is the true version of reality? Or are we all caught in a hall of mirrors, endlessly reflecting and being reflected, until identity becomes nothing more than the sum of our feedback cycles? Think of the gaze not as passive light, but as a force, bending and shaping the very fabric of human experience. You are never simply watching, and you are never simply being watched. You are co-authoring a moment, weaving probability into form, spiraling deeper into a reality that exists only because two minds collided in awareness. Every glance becomes an act of creation. Every shared silence, a negotiation of existence. And so the endless cycle continues, an infinite loop of becoming, undoing, and remaking. You change because they are watching, they change because you are watching, and neither will ever be who they were before the gaze began. Expectation-driven outcome shift. Imagine stepping into a room with a quiet certainty about how events will unfold. You expect warmth from someone, and somehow their smile seems brighter. You expect hostility, and every word they speak carries a hidden edge. This is the expectation-driven outcome shift, the strange way belief does not merely predict reality, but bends it. What you think will happen often alters what does happen, blurring the line between cause and effect. Your expectation becomes a script, and the world, unwilling or unable to resist, plays its part. Psychology has studied this phenomenon under many names. The placebo effect shows how belief in healing can produce measurable improvements in health, even when the treatment is inert. Sugar pills ease pain, fake surgeries reduce symptoms, sham therapies improve depression. The body, guided by expectation, generates its own outcome. On the darker side, the nocebo effect reveals how expecting harm can produce real suffering. Patients told a harmless procedure might cause nausea often feel sick. Expectation doesn't just shape perception, it rewires the body itself, bending biology toward belief. In classrooms, the Pygmalion effect demonstrates how teachers' expectations shift students' futures. When educators believe a child is gifted, they unconsciously give more encouragement, more patience, more opportunity. Performance rises to meet the prophecy. Conversely, low expectations suppress potential, smothering it before it has a chance to bloom. The student becomes what the teacher silently imagined. Belief acts like invisible hands, sculpting outcomes in flesh and time. Even in memory, expectation leaves its fingerprints. When you anticipate remembering something clearly, you often do. When you expect to forget, the memory fades faster. Experiments show that eyewitnesses influenced by subtle cues, you probably saw a man in a red jacket, right? Reshape their memory to fit the suggestion. What they expect to recall becomes what they truly recall. Expectation bends the fragile threads of truth until imagination and memory are indistinguishable. This distortion stretches into the grand stage of society. Markets rise and fall not only on hard data, but on collective expectations. If enough investors believe a crash is coming, they pull out their money, and the crash manifests. A belief whispered between minds becomes a global outcome, billions of dollars evaporating into air. Expectation isn't just private, it is viral, spreading through groups until shared belief solidifies into reality. Even relationships bend beneath this weight. If you expect betrayal, your suspicion poisons every interaction. You withdraw, you test, you accuse, and eventually the bond shatters, fulfilling the very outcome you feared. If you expect love and loyalty, you nurture, forgive, and encourage, and the relationship strengthens, becoming exactly what you imagined. Belief becomes prophecy, and prophecy becomes truth. The unsettling part is that the process is often invisible. You believe you are simply predicting reality, when in fact you are co-authoring it. Your expectation alters your tone of voice, your body language, your patience, your persistence. It alters how others respond, how they perceive you, how they decide to act. The shift happens in countless micro-moments, so subtle you may never see them, but in the end, the result lines up neatly with what you foresaw. It feels like fate, but it was you, shaping it all along. Expectation-driven outcome shift raises a haunting question. How much of your life has been guided not by chance, but by the quiet force of belief? How many failures were born the moment you expected them? How many victories began when you decided they were possible? Reality may not bend fully to your will, but it bends enough to remind you that your thoughts are not passive. They are architects. They are levers. They are shadows of the future cast before the future arrives. The distortion is not that expectation exists, it is that it disguises itself as truth. You think you are seeing reality, but you are often seeing a reflection of your own belief, projected outward, mirrored back. The world is not neutral. It is pliable, responsive, suggestible. It waits for the story you tell about it, then strains to perform in harmony with your script. So each belief you carry becomes more than a thought. It is a seed of outcome, bending the arc of events toward itself. Expectation is not just foresight, it is a quiet, relentless hand on the wheel of reality. And every time you imagine what must happen next, the world tilts slightly, invisibly, toward making it so. Cosmic witness effect. Imagine the universe not as a stage with actors who perform regardless of who is watching, but as something stranger, as though the very act of being witnessed alters the script. This is the unsettling idea of the cosmic witness effect, that large-scale events, from the birth of stars to the collapse of civilizations, unfold differently when they are observed by conscious life. As if awareness itself is not a spectator, but a participant, woven into the fabric of reality. Think of how in quantum physics, the smallest particles behave differently under observation. An electron does not reveal its position until someone looks. Photons choose paths based on whether they are measured. Now stretch that principle outward into the cosmos. What if supernovae, black holes, or even the trajectory of entire galaxies are not purely objective, but bend slightly under the gaze of consciousness. What if the universe is not indifferent, but responsive, shifting the details of its unfolding in the presence of eyes that can wonder about it? There are haunting examples that echo this idea. Ancient cultures looked to the skies, mapping constellations, telling stories, and drawing meaning from the heavens. To them, the stars were alive, responding to human reverence. Modern science dismisses such myths as projection, yet physics itself admits that observation changes outcomes. Could it be that awareness on a grand scale, millions staring at a cosmic event, billions reflecting on a shared catastrophe, creates ripples not only in culture, but in the event itself? That the more witnesses there are, the more reality bends in subtle but undeniable ways? Consider history. Wars end differently when the world is watching. Leaders act with more calculation when they know eyes are upon them. Atrocities unfold in deeper silence when hidden from view. Awareness changes outcomes, not through bullets or laws, but through the sheer gravity of attention. The same might be true at the cosmic level. A supernova noticed becomes part of a new pattern, shaping the birth of galaxies differently than one that dies unseen. A catastrophe on Earth may bend in its timing or its scale because billions anticipate it. The witness, in this view, is as much a causal force as gravity or time. This idea opens terrifying and beautiful questions. Is the universe conscious of our consciousness? Do stars flare brighter when someone marvels at them? Does the cosmos test itself through us, waiting for eyes to appear so it can reveal hidden sides of itself? Perhaps awareness is not an accident of evolution, but a necessary ingredient in reality's unfolding, a mirror through which existence reshapes itself. Without witnesses, perhaps the universe remains incomplete, like a play rehearsed in an empty theater, its meaning deferred until the seats are filled. And so the cosmic witness effect suggests that nothing large or small is untouched by our gaze. To be aware is to tilt the scales of reality, to bend events, to rewrite the script. The cosmos may not just be happening to us, we may be co-authoring it, word by word, look by look, thought by thought. Every time you look up at the stars, every time billions tune in to a single moment, reality itself may shift, not just in your mind, but in the universe's unfolding. Recorded history mutation. Imagine history as something solid, fixed in stone. We like to think that once an event has happened, it belongs to the past forever, immune to change. But the moment we write it down, something subtle and irreversible begins. The record becomes not a mirror of reality but a filter, a translation, and sometimes a distortion. What was once a living, chaotic event gets compressed into words. The words reshape memory, and the memory reshapes the meaning of the event itself. Over time, the record can become more powerful than the truth it was meant to preserve. Take the battlefields of history. Soldiers who survived wars often recalled confusion, terror, and fragmented impressions. Yet when generals wrote reports or historians published accounts, the chaos was smoothed into coherent narratives. Heroes and villains, victories and defeats, causes and consequences. The lived reality of sweat, fear, and screams gave way to neat sentences, names, and dates. What future generations remembered was not the event, but the written story of it. And with each retelling, the event itself mutated, until the history bore only partial resemblance to what had truly occurred. This effect is not just cultural, it is psychological. Neuroscience tells us that memory is not fixed. Each time you recall a memory, it is rewritten, vulnerable to alteration. Writing it down amplifies this process. You take fragments of experience, arrange them into language, and lock them into a narrative. That narrative then feeds back into your own recollection, until you begin to remember the story more vividly than the experience itself. Over time, you forget where the memory ends and the written account begins. The line between fact and record dissolves. Consider how diaries work. A person might experience a day filled with countless impressions, moments of joy, irritation, boredom, surprise. Yet when they sit down to write, they highlight certain details, omit others, and arrange everything into a narrative that feels meaningful. Days later, when they reread the entry, their memory of the day changes. The entry becomes the anchor, and the original experience fades. Eventually, the written words become the memory. Now magnify that on a cultural scale. Think of ancient chronicles, written by scribes in royal courts. Victories were magnified, defeats minimized. Rulers were elevated into legends, their flaws erased. These texts became the foundation of collective memory, shaping not just how people understood their past but how they lived their present. Wars were justified, empires glorified, revolts silenced, all through the selective pen of the recorder. In a very real sense, the act of writing down the past created an alternate past, one that grew stronger than reality itself. Even in modern times, this loop continues. Media coverage of events can overshadow the events themselves. A protest, for instance, might feel one way to those who attended, raw, messy, unpredictable. But the way it is reported, framed as chaotic violence or noble resistance, reshapes public memory. Within weeks, the narrative becomes the reality, and even those who were there may doubt their own recollections, conforming to the written record. There's also a darker edge. When history is deliberately rewritten, through propaganda, censorship, or biased retellings, it doesn't just distort memory, it mutates reality itself. Generations grow up with versions of the past that never happened. Their decisions, identities, and conflicts are shaped by shadows of history, by events that exist only in ink, not in fact. And yet, for them, those written shadows are more real than the truth could ever be. This leads to a haunting paradox. The act of recording something to preserve it may be the very act that changes it. The past does not simply exist. It is constructed and reconstructed every time it is remembered, written, or read. Every chronicle is not a mirror but a mutation, one more step away from the event itself. So when you think of history, do not imagine a solid archive of facts sealed in time. Imagine instead a living organism, mutating with every word written about it, reshaped each time it is told, edited with every new hand that records it. The past is not behind us, it is rewritten in the present, and through that rewriting, it alters the future we step into. Judgment-induced path change. Imagine walking across a stage with no one watching. Your steps are natural, your rhythm steady, your mind focused only on reaching the other side. Now picture the same walk with dozens of eyes fixed on you, their gaze sharp with judgment. Suddenly your body betrays you, your stride stiffens, your breathing grows shallow, and every step feels rehearsed, fragile, uncertain. The path you take is no longer the one you would have walked. It has been rewritten by the presence of evaluation. This is the judgment-induced path change, the phenomenon where being assessed alters performance so profoundly that the event itself becomes something else entirely. This is not a small distortion, but a deep rewriting of reality. Athletes who train flawlessly in practice often stumble under the lights of competition, their movements constricted by awareness of scrutiny. Students who know the material may forget simple answers when tested, not because the knowledge has vanished, but because judgment has bent the path of thought, forcing them into hesitation, doubt, and error. The act of evaluation doesn't just measure, it transforms. What the observer records is not the authentic performance, but a version that exists only because it was being judged. Think of a musician rehearsing alone, fingers flowing effortlessly across strings. The moment an audience enters the room, even a small one, the music shifts. Notes are played more carefully, less boldly, sometimes even more beautifully, but undeniably differently. The presence of judgment reshapes the art itself, creating a new piece of music that would never have existed without the gaze. This is both a gift and a curse. Some rise to the evaluation, pushing beyond their limits, while others collapse under its invisible weight. Either way, the path diverges. The event is changed. Even in everyday life, this effect rules us more than we realize. A worker giving a presentation may suddenly speak with polished clarity, not because they rehearsed that way, but because the judgment of colleagues forced them into a heightened state. A person in conversation may soften their words, exaggerate their confidence, or betray their nervousness once they feel evaluated. The natural flow of thought and action fractures under the awareness of being scored, whether by peers, superiors, or strangers. What unfolds is not who they are, but who they are under judgment. This distortion is so powerful it can even reshape entire histories. Think of trials, interviews, and competitions where decisions hinge not on authentic ability, but on how someone performs under the pressure of evaluation. Entire careers, freedoms, and futures are decided on these altered paths. A person who fails in the moment may be judged unworthy, when in another context, without the crushing weight of judgment, they might have excelled. Conversely, someone who thrives under scrutiny may be celebrated, even if their ordinary performance is unremarkable. The event ceases to be a reflection of truth, it becomes a reflection of judgment's influence. The paradox is striking. Judgment is meant to reveal reality, yet it destroys it. By measuring, we corrupt the thing being measured. By watching, we alter the path. By evaluating, we guarantee that what we see is not what would have been, but a new version sculpted by the pressure of our gaze. Just as a particle in quantum mechanics collapses into one state when observed, so too do human actions collapse into forms they would never have taken if left unjudged. The world we record is always one step removed from the world that might have been. And yet, this effect is not always destructive. Some of the greatest performances in history have been born from the fire of judgment. A sprinter who shatters records, a speaker who ignites revolutions, a singer whose voice trembles into something transcendent. All of these are realities that exist only because judgment changed the path. Without the gaze, without the pressure, those extraordinary versions of human potential might never have emerged. Judgment distorts, but it also creates. It erases one possibility and replaces it with another, forever altering the timeline. But here lies the haunting truth. We will never know what was lost. The perfect shot that would have been taken in practice but missed under the eyes of millions. The flawless idea silenced in the test room because fear tightened the chest. The effortless walk across the stage that became a stumble under the weight of evaluation. The paths that vanish under judgment are invisible, erased before they can be lived. We inherit only the distorted reality, and we call it truth. So the next time you watch someone being judged, an athlete, a student, a performer, remember that what you are seeing is not pure skill or authentic essence. It is a path altered, bent, reshaped by the presence of evaluation. Judgment doesn't just observe reality. It rewrites it. And in that rewriting, the event itself ceases to be what it would have been, leaving us forever wondering what truths were lost in the silence of paths never taken. Astronomical delay paradox. Imagine looking up into the night sky, those scattered points of light burning with timeless brilliance. To the naked eye, they feel immediate, alive, present. Yet the cruel paradox is that you are not seeing them as they are, you are seeing them as they were. Each star, each galaxy, each radiant nebula, is separated from you by a gulf of time so immense that your act of observation is already delayed. The light that reaches your eye tonight may have left its source millions of years ago. And in that time, entire worlds may have perished, stars may have collapsed into black holes, civilizations may have risen and vanished. What you call the present is, in truth, already a ghost. This is the astronomical delay paradox. The universe you perceive is not the universe that exists now, but the universe fossilized in light. Every glance at the stars is a form of time travel. When you see the sun, you see it as it was 8 minutes earlier. When you look at Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, you see it as it was 9 years ago. And when your eyes trace the faint smear of the Andromeda galaxy, you are peering across more than 2 million years into the past. In other words, the night sky is not a window to the present, it is a graveyard of ancient moments. Consider the unsettling possibility this creates. A supernova may have already detonated in some corner of space, its fiery death tearing apart the silence of a distant system. Yet here on Earth, you will not know for centuries, perhaps millennia. To you, that star still glimmers peacefully. The illusion of stability masks the truth. You are staring at corpses that have not yet revealed their deaths. You live surrounded by phantoms, believing them to be alive because their last light still travels through the void toward you. This paradox stretches further, into the nature of reality itself. If every act of cosmic observation is delayed, then what does now even mean on a universal scale? Your sense of the present is confined to Earth, a fragile bubble of immediacy. Beyond it, every vision is archival. You are never in step with the universe. You are always behind it, running after echoes. The stars you wish upon may already be dust. The galaxies you map may no longer resemble their forms. Even the light of your own planet, if viewed from far enough away, would tell a story long outdated. Yet there is a strange beauty in this delay. It means that nothing is ever truly lost. The first sparks of galaxies, the collapse of ancient stars, the earliest fires of creation, all of it still exists in light, carrying its memory forward. The universe does not only move forward, it preserves its own history in beams of energy, gifting every observer with a vision of what once was. You, standing under the night sky, become both witness and archaeologist, sifting through layers of time disguised as starlight. But this also forces a haunting reflection. When you gaze at the heavens, you are never looking at reality itself. You are looking at ghosts of reality. The stars are messengers that may already be gone, their brilliance an afterimage painted across the darkness. The paradox leaves you suspended in a cosmic illusion where your eyes tell you one truth, while the universe hides another. Reality, as you live it, is already a delay, a lie sculpted by the limits of light. So next time you raise your head toward the stars, know that you are standing inside a paradox. You are not gazing into space, you are gazing into time. You are surrounded not by the present, but by echoes, shadows, and phantoms. And in that realization lies both terror and wonder. The recognition that the universe you think you see has already changed, and you are left holding only its ghosts. Self-observation identity warp. There is something strange that happens when you turn your awareness inward and refuse to look away. The act of watching yourself for too long is not passive, it reshapes you. When you stare too deeply into a mirror, when you constantly analyze your own words, or when you replay your own actions over and over again in your mind, you are no longer the same person you were before the observation began. This is the paradox of self-observation. It doesn't just reveal who you are, it creates a new identity that didn't exist a moment earlier. The self you think you're examining becomes distorted, bent under the weight of awareness, until what remains is a version of you that is more an artifact of scrutiny than of truth. Imagine a performer on stage who begins the night by acting in character. But the longer the spotlight shines, the more they begin to question whether the mask is really a mask at all. At first, they pretend for the audience. Then, as minutes stretch into hours, their mannerisms adapt, their voice shifts, their mind begins to merge with the role. By the end, they aren't sure where the performance ends and their authentic self begins. This is how observation warps identity. By locking consciousness into a feedback loop where watching creates becoming, and becoming alters what is being watched. Psychologists often describe something similar when they study self-monitoring. People who constantly measure their behavior, how they walk, how they smile, how they are perceived, tend to act in ways that deviate from what they might naturally do. It's not deceit, it's transformation. The act of self-tracking bends reality until the raw self is replaced by the observed self, a new construction built out of attention. Athletes choke when they suddenly notice the crowd watching, musicians falter when they start paying attention to their own fingers instead of the music, and ordinary people lose their natural rhythm when they suddenly think about how they look while walking down a crowded street. The moment you focus too long on yourself, the person you were dissolves, and a new person, slightly artificial, slightly distorted, takes the stage. But the strangest part is this. Once that new self is formed, it doesn't simply vanish when the observation stops. It lingers, folded into your memory. You recall the version of you that emerged under scrutiny as if it was always there. In this way, self-observation plants seeds of alternate identities within your own timeline. Look long enough, and you will begin to stack selves on top of each other. An original self, a watched self, an adjusted self, all layered like transparent sheets of glass. Each time you return to reflection, you aren't observing the same person as before. You're observing the person who survived the last round of being watched. In other words, every act of self-reflection subtly rewrites your history of who you think you are. There are ancient echoes of this in philosophy. The idea that the soul reveals itself when it turns its gaze inward. But perhaps the opposite is true. The soul mutates when it watches itself too closely. Mystics who meditated for long hours sometimes wrote that they encountered versions of themselves that no longer resembled the person who first sat down. They weren't peeling away masks to find a core. They were generating entirely new selves with every prolonged glance into the mirror of awareness. Identity was not discovered, but constructed in real time, as fragile and fluid as smoke. Even in modern life, you can feel this phenomenon quietly shaping your days. Think of the moment when you turn on your front-facing camera by accident. For a second, you see yourself looking back, unprepared. And then instantly, you adjust. Your expression shifts, your posture straightens, your eyes widen. The self that existed an instant before disappears, replaced by the self that is aware of being seen. Now imagine sustaining that awareness not for a second, but for minutes, hours, even years. That is what happens to people who live under constant reflection. Actors, influencers, even those trapped in cycles of overthinking. The longer the gaze lasts, the less authentic the self becomes, until eventually the line between the natural and the artificial blurs beyond recognition. And yet, there is a hidden danger here. Because once you become aware of this process, you might begin to question which of your identities is real. Are you the person who acts without reflection, guided by instinct? Or are you the person who emerges under scrutiny, the polished version of yourself shaped by constant observation? The answer may be that neither is truly real, because both are products of context. One is born in shadow, the other under the spotlight. You are the sum of both, a shifting constellation of identities, some of which never existed until you created them by watching. This paradox extends even into memory. Studies show that when you recall an event from your past, you don't replay the raw memory. You replay the last time you remembered it. Which means that memory is like self-observation. Every act of looking changes what you find. Every time you revisit who you were, you aren't uncovering the past, you're rewriting it. And in doing so, you generate a past self that never truly existed, but now feels real because it is the version preserved in memory. The observer within you becomes the author, turning history into a fiction that hardens into truth. So the next time you catch yourself staring too long into your own reflection, whether in a literal mirror, a photograph, or the quiet corridors of your thoughts, remember this: you are not just observing yourself. You are sculpting yourself. Every glance is a chisel, every reflection a new draft. If you look long enough, you may emerge as someone who never existed before the moment of watching. And perhaps that is the great irony of self-consciousness, that the closer you look at who you are, the further you drift from who you were. Performance reality creation. Imagine standing before an audience, your heart pounding, your words rehearsed, your gestures practiced. At first, it is all surface, a mask, a role, a carefully constructed image designed to be seen. But something strange happens with repetition. Pretending, over time, starts to harden into truth. The audience reacts. Their eyes mirror back a version of you that slowly seeps inward. What began as performance becomes reality. You are no longer merely acting. You are becoming. This is the haunting cycle of performance reality creation, the idea that by pretending long enough, for long enough, the fiction dissolves into fact. Psychology offers examples. In social settings, people adopt personas to fit expectations. The confident leader, the stoic thinker, the warm entertainer. At first, these may feel artificial. But repeated often, they begin to rewrite internal identity. This is a phenomenon known as self-perception theory. We infer who we are by observing our own actions. If you keep acting brave in front of others, eventually you feel braver. If you smile even when sad, you begin to feel lighter. The mask fuses with the face. The role swallows the actor. History, too, is filled with figures who lived this transformation. An uncertain leader who pretended strength for the sake of followers became, in time, genuinely strong. An artist who played the eccentric genius slowly inhabited that role until the performance was indistinguishable from the truth. Even lies told often enough become lived realities, shaping nations, cultures, and generations. Entire societies have performed myths about their greatness, their destiny, their superiority, until the myth became law, written into the bones of history itself. There is a darker side as well. If pretending can create truth, then delusion can crystallize into reality. A person who acts cruel because it serves a role may one day find no part of themselves left untouched by cruelty. A nation that performs violence in the name of survival may, with time, become defined by that violence. The act consumes the actor. The fiction consumes the world. And the terrifying part is that it does not matter if the performance was false at the beginning. Reality bends to it, slowly but surely, until there is no way back. But there is also liberation here. If pretending shapes truth, then performance can be a tool for transformation. Someone broken who pretends resilience may grow into it. Someone voiceless who pretends power may find their voice. The stage of life is not only a place of deception, but a workshop for becoming. In this sense, every audience is not just watching who you are, but helping to sculpt who you will be. Their gaze reflects, reinforces, and strengthens the role until it calcifies into identity. Performance reality creation whispers something unnerving yet empowering. Authenticity itself may be nothing more than a performance played long enough to be believed. The self may not be a core essence, but a story rehearsed into permanence. And if that is true, then every mask you wear, every act you play, every script you deliver to the world carries within it the seed of becoming. Pretend long enough, and the curtain never falls. The act becomes the actor. The role becomes the soul. And the fiction, at last, becomes the truth. Idea capture distortion. Imagine a thought flickering in your mind, fluid, shifting, impossible to pin down. It feels alive, full of branching possibilities, unfinished yet infinite. But the moment you reach for a pen, a keyboard, or even a voice to share it, something irreversible happens. That thought solidifies. The fluid branches collapse into one chosen path, and what was once a living spark becomes a captured fragment. Writing or sharing a new thought does not preserve it as it was, it distorts it, reshaping it into something that could never have existed in silence. Think about those moments of sudden inspiration. In your head, the idea feels limitless, luminous, like it could unfold in 1,000 directions. But once you begin to write it, you make decisions. You choose words, and each word excludes others. You create structure, and structure changes meaning. The private infinity narrows into a single public line of expression. Later, when you reread it, you may wonder why the idea feels smaller, different, less mysterious than it did when it lived only in your mind. That shift is not your imagination. It is the distortion created by capture. Writers know this paradox intimately. Drafts of novels, poems, or theories never quite match the fire of the original vision. The act of translating from thought to language is not neutral. It forces compromise. Language cannot hold the rawness of thought. It simplifies, edits, and distorts. That is why many creators feel that the work they share is a shadow of what they truly conceived. The pure idea was never written. What survives is its mutation. Psychologists have studied this in subtle ways. One phenomenon, known as the verbal overshadowing effect, shows that when people describe something, say, a face they saw in a crime experiment, their later memory for it becomes worse. The act of putting the image into words distorts the memory, locking it into a version shaped by language rather than raw perception. The same happens with thoughts. When you write them, you are not recording the original. You are overwriting it with a linguistic substitute. There is also the social distortion of sharing. Speak an idea aloud, and it is no longer yours alone. The reaction of others, approval, indifference, criticism, feeds back into it, changing how you see it. A private, fragile thought that felt profound may seem trivial once spoken into silence. Or a thought you doubted might grow stronger when someone nods in recognition. The moment of sharing alters not only the idea itself but your relationship to it. History, too, is filled with examples of this phenomenon. Philosophers, scientists, and inventors often noted how the first expression of a theory or vision seemed inadequate compared to the original spark. Einstein, for instance, wrote that the deepest insights came in flashes of intuition, difficult to explain, and only afterward were they clothed in equations and words. The equations were powerful, but they were not the same as the original, wordless leap. The capture had already changed the thought. There's a haunting paradox here. We write or speak to preserve ideas, to keep them from being lost. But in doing so, we also lose something, the fluid, infinite version that lived only inside. The captured idea is not the thought itself, but its fossil, a record of what survived translation. And like all fossils, it both reveals and conceals, showing us a shape while hiding the life that once pulsed through it. So the next time you feel a thought rising, luminous and unformed, pause for a moment before you capture it. Ask yourself, am I preserving it, or am I transforming it? Because once you put it into words, it will never again exist as it did in silence. Writing does not freeze ideas, it mutates them, creating versions that could never have lived privately. Every note, every story, every sentence is not the thought itself but the distortion of its capture, a new reality born from the act of expression. Magnetic gaze influence. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, writing, thinking, breathing easily. Your hands move without hesitation, your mind flows where it wishes. Now imagine a pair of eyes fixed on you, unblinking, heavy with focus. The air thickens. Your thoughts stumble. You adjust your movements, you second-guess your choices, you feel a strange weight pressing down on the natural rhythm you had just moments before. This is the magnetic gaze influence, the phenomenon where the simple intensity of being stared at bends outcomes, pulling them away from their natural flow, reshaping what you do and who you are in that moment. Human beings are deeply sensitive to eyes. Evolution trained us to notice a gaze because for most of our history, it meant danger, judgment, or opportunity. To be watched was to be measured. Even today, under the scrutiny of a stranger, your heartbeat quickens, your posture changes, your decisions skew. A person walking alone may move casually, almost drifting. But when stared at, their steps sharpen, their body tenses, their pace shifts. The path they walk is no longer the one they would have taken. It has been rewritten by the magnetic gravity of another's eyes. This influence has been measured in subtle but undeniable ways. Experiments have shown that even the image of a pair of eyes on a wall can change human behavior. In cafeterias, people leave cleaner tables when posters of eyes are present. In honesty boxes, contributions increase when eye-like symbols are displayed. No words, no rules, no instructions. Just the suggestion of a gaze is enough to reshape action. It is as if the human brain cannot escape the deep-rooted pull of being watched. The flow of choice, once natural, becomes bent toward caution, performance, even submission. Consider a performer on stage. They may have rehearsed their lines countless times alone, flawless and free. But under the collective gaze of hundreds, their voice may quiver, their timing may shift, or, for some, brilliance erupts beyond anything achieved in solitude. The eyes of the crowd act like a magnetic field, altering the trajectory of performance, warping it into something unrepeatable outside that shared moment of attention. The performance that exists is not the one that would have been. It is a creation born of the gaze. The magnetic gaze can change power itself. In a conversation, the one who holds steady eye contact often steers the direction, forcing the other into hesitations, concessions, or nervous laughter. In animal kingdoms, the direct stare is a weapon. Wolves, lions, and primates all use gaze as dominance, to bend the behavior of others without lifting a claw. The same invisible pressure lives within us. Eyes pin us into new versions of ourselves, versions sculpted by attention rather than by choice. But it goes deeper still. Think of surveillance, cameras on every corner, lenses always watching. Even if no one is staring directly, the possibility of gaze shifts behavior. People cross streets more carefully, avoid certain gestures, censor their words. The gaze does not have to be real. The idea of it is enough. And as this silent field spreads across cities and screens, human action bends in countless small, invisible ways, away from natural spontaneity, toward calculated performance. The world becomes less of what it would have been, and more of what the gaze demands it to be. Yet there is a paradox here. The gaze can also create beauty and greatness that would never exist without it. The athlete who runs faster when eyes are upon them, the speaker who finds words sharper when the audience leans in, the artist who breaks through fear to produce brilliance when under scrutiny. The magnetic gaze does not always crush. Sometimes it awakens dormant strength, pulling hidden possibilities into reality. But the outcome is always different. Whether diminished or elevated, it is never the pure flow that would have existed in the absence of eyes. And so we face a strange truth. To be seen is to be changed. The moment someone's gaze fixes upon us, we step onto an altered path. The natural flow we might have followed vanishes, replaced by a new current carved by the invisible weight of attention. Every stare is a subtle act of creation, rewriting what would have been into what now is. What we call reality, then, is always threaded with distortion, bent and sculpted by the magnetic pull of eyes we cannot ignore. So ask yourself, how much of who you are is truly you, and how much is simply who you become when you are being watched? Hidden observer trigger. Imagine a person walking alone down a quiet street at night. Their steps are steady, their posture loose, their face unguarded. In that solitude, they are themselves in a way they rarely are when seen. But now imagine a sudden realization, the faint scrape of a shoe, the flicker of movement in a window, the subtle knowledge that eyes might be watching. In that instant, everything changes. Their stride stiffens, their breath shifts, their awareness sharpens. The reality that was unfolding collapses, and another one takes its place. This is the hidden observer trigger. The moment knowledge of being seen rewrites the script of reality itself. The difference may appear small, just posture, tone, or timing, but beneath the surface it is seismic. When unseen, people act from an unconscious rhythm, guided by inner impulses, unfiltered instincts. The moment observation enters awareness, they switch modes. They become performers, curators of their own image, participants in an invisible stage. A life that was flowing naturally is now directed toward what the observer might think. Reality becomes less about what is and more about what is seen. This effect has been captured across psychology and history. The Hawthorne studies in the 1920s revealed that workers changed productivity simply because they realized they were under observation. Their environment didn't change. Their skills didn't change. Only the awareness of being watched shifted the entire outcome. In classrooms, children behave differently when they sense a teacher's eyes, even when no words are spoken. Surveillance cameras on street corners alter not only crime but casual body language. The hidden observer does not need to act, they only need to exist. Their presence, once revealed, becomes a gravitational force pulling reality into a new orbit. But here lies the paradox. Before the watcher was noticed, a different reality was already unfolding. Both versions, the unguarded self and the watched self, are real. Yet only one is preserved, only one is remembered. It means our sense of truth is fragile, contingent not just on events themselves, but on the awareness of eyes upon us. Without the observer, life moves one way. With the observer, it reroutes entirely. And the moment the subject knows, the first reality vanishes, replaced by another that will never fully reveal what might have been. Think of the hidden observer trigger like a switch in consciousness. Before, the self is transparent, invisible even to itself. After, the self fractures, part of you still living, part of you watching yourself live. You become both actor and critic, trapped in a feedback loop where authenticity dissolves. You smile differently, speak differently, even think differently, because your inner narrative is no longer private. You are constructing yourself for the gaze of another. Now extend this beyond the individual. Imagine governments, corporations, entire societies aware of hidden observers, whether spies, cameras, or invisible audiences online. Decisions, laws, even revolutions change shape when those involved realize they are being watched. What could have happened unobserved, secrets whispered, rebellion sparked, truths revealed, may never unfold the same way once the gaze is acknowledged. Reality itself bends under the weight of awareness. And here is the haunting thought. If every hidden observer alters reality once revealed, then what is the world really like when no one is watching? How many versions of life have already been erased the moment awareness entered the room? Every unobserved moment carries a secret authenticity that can never be reclaimed once it has been illuminated. So next time you catch the flicker of awareness, that someone sees you, that you are no longer alone, remember the shift you are stepping into. A hidden observer has triggered the transformation. The world you were living in collapses, replaced by a new performance. And though you may never know which version of you is true, one fact remains: reality is never stable. It waits, fragile and pliable, for the eyes that fall upon it. Observer's curse. There is a peculiar curse woven into the fabric of reality, whispered about in both science and folklore. It is the idea that rare events, those strange flickers of impossibility, the one-in-a-million moments that defy explanation, seem to vanish the instant you try to capture them. You may have heard a story of someone seeing a mysterious light in the sky, a fleeting figure in the corner of their vision, or a bizarre coincidence too precise to ignore. The first instinct is to record it, to verify it, to prove to others that it really happened. But as soon as the phone comes out, as soon as the pen touches the paper, the phenomenon evaporates, leaving nothing but empty air and doubt. This is the observer's curse. The very act of trying to preserve a rare event ensures its disappearance. It feels as if reality guards its secrets with this trick. The moment you turn your awareness into proof, the phenomenon collapses. Imagine a person who claims to hear whispers in an abandoned house. At first, the voice is clear, steady, undeniable. But when they set up a recorder to capture it, the house falls into perfect silence. Another person speaks of déjà vu so intense it feels like prophecy, yet the moment they stop to write it down, the sensation slips from their mind like smoke between their fingers. Even in science, elusive phenomena often play this game. Early particle physicists struggled to detect rare quantum effects because the moment they set instruments to measure them, the very act of observation forced the event into another state. It is as though improbabilities thrive in shadow, but wither under the spotlight of proof. There is also a psychological layer to this curse. Our attention is not neutral. It distorts. When you watch a rare occurrence without trying to document it, your mind absorbs the full experience. But when you split your awareness between experiencing and capturing, you fracture the event itself. The uncanny loses its flow. It becomes strained, artificial, like a dream slipping away as soon as you try to tell someone about it. This is why so many mysterious encounters live only in fragile testimony. The memory survives, but the evidence does not. The rare event becomes a story, not a record, because the attempt to record is what killed it. Think of how people describe seeing a strange animal dart across a lonely road. It's always when the phone is off, when the camera is out of reach, when the moment is pure and unprepared. As soon as awareness sharpens into intent, I must prove this happened, the phenomenon retreats. In folklore, this was attributed to spirits who despised being named, who would vanish if you tried to capture them in ink. In modern times, it echoes through the frustrating impossibility of ever getting clear footage of the extraordinary. The event seems allergic to verification. It exists only for the witness, never for the record. Yet the observer's curse is more than superstition. It reflects a deeper truth about probability. Rare events, by definition, are unlikely to occur. The moment you set out to capture one, you have already influenced the conditions. You create pressure, expectation, intention, all of which subtly bend the odds away from the improbable and back toward the ordinary. The extraordinary thrives in accidents, in randomness, in the unobserved corner of experience. Once you focus your gaze, you create structure, and structure drives the rare back into hiding. The bizarre refuses to repeat itself under test conditions, because testing itself is the opposite of chaos. And this curse leaves behind an unsettling implication, that some realities may only exist in states of privacy. That certain phenomena are not meant to be shared, because the act of sharing would erase them. If that is true, then humanity may live in a world filled with wonders we can never prove. Wonders that survive only as memories in individuals, isolated from verification, forever doomed to be dismissed as mistakes, illusions, or lies. It raises a disturbing question. How much of reality vanishes before it can be confirmed? How much of the world's hidden strangeness dissolves every time someone points a camera at it? This curse may also explain the loneliness of experience. The rarest events in your life may never be believed because you will never be able to prove them. You might encounter something so strange it reshapes you completely, yet remain silent because you know it cannot be documented. In this way, the observer's curse creates private universes, realities known only to the individual who experienced them, realities that die with them if never told. It suggests that truth itself may be fragile, dependent on being witnessed but destroyed by being recorded. So imagine this. You are standing in the dark, and before you, something impossible flickers, a shadow that shouldn't move, a light that shouldn't glow, a coincidence too precise to be random. For a heartbeat, it is undeniable. The world tilts, and you see what few have ever seen. Instinctively, you reach for proof. A notebook, a lens, a witness. And in that very moment, the thing you saw dissolves. You are left staring at the same quiet world as before, holding nothing but the echo of what was almost captured. That is the curse. Reality allows you to glimpse its hidden layers, but only on the condition that you never prove they were there. And so, across history, the greatest mysteries remain undocumented. The rarest truths are untouchable. They appear, they vanish, they leave no record behind. All you can do is carry them, knowing that the act of trying to prove them would only ensure they were never real in the first place. The observer's curse is not just about rare events. It is about the fragile border between seeing and proving, between believing and knowing. It whispers that some truths were never meant to be caught, only felt, only remembered, only lived. Timing distortion effect. Imagine watching an event not as it happens, but after it has already passed. You believe you are only observing history, fixed and silent, but the very act of seeing it later changes what it is. This is the unsettling idea of the timing distortion effect, that observation at different times alters the event itself, as though time bends to the presence of a witness. Reality, in this view, is not a rigid film playing once and forever, but a pliable loop that reshapes according to when awareness enters. Quantum mechanics already hints at this strangeness. In delayed choice experiments, a particle's past behavior seems to change depending on how we choose to measure it in the present. The decision made now appears to reach backward, rewriting what the particle was before we looked. It is as if time waits for us, refusing to finalize its story until a conscious mind arrives to read it. Past and present are not separate compartments. They are entangled, woven together in a way that allows the observer to alter what was by the simple act of looking later. Think of a photograph discovered years after it was taken. The moment it captures has long passed, yet the act of finding it now changes the way the event is remembered, interpreted, and perhaps even how it existed. A war, for example, looks different when documented and revisited decades later than it did in the heat of its unfolding. To some degree, history itself is plastic, shaped not only by the moment it occurred, but by the timing of when it is witnessed. The same battle, the same death, the same triumph can carry entirely different meanings depending on when human eyes fall upon it. This effect scales beyond memory. Imagine if cosmic events themselves, supernovae, planetary alignments, the birth of galaxies, unfold differently when observed at different times, as though the act of delayed witnessing feeds back into their unfolding. A star's light may travel for millions of years, unseen until it arrives at the eye of a conscious being. But does the star's story remain frozen across those eons, or does its truth only crystallize the moment it is seen? If so, then time is not an arrow, but a canvas, unfinished until awareness completes it. Even in daily life, we feel echoes of this distortion. You remember a conversation differently years later, the details bending as you revisit it with new eyes. An event that once felt meaningless suddenly appears pivotal because you observed it again in another season of your life. What was trivial becomes profound. What was painful becomes instructive. The past is not locked. It is rewritten by the timing of your attention. In this way, your awareness does not just travel through time. It sculpts it, revises it, adjusts it. And so the timing distortion effect whispers a chilling thought: nothing is ever fully past. Reality does not settle until it has been seen, and even then, it may resettle when seen again. Every glance across time leaves fingerprints, ripples that reshape what was and what is. Observation is not bound to the present. It stretches backward and forward, a quiet force that bends the very flow of time. To look is not simply to know. It is to alter. To witness is to distort. And perhaps the story of the universe is not what happened, but what happens each time it is observed. Data feedback mutation. Imagine a world where data feels like truth carved out of reality, neutral, objective, untouched. But the moment you measure something, the thing you are measuring is no longer the same. The act of collecting information does not simply reveal reality, it mutates it. Observers know this paradox well. To gather data is to interfere, to leave fingerprints on the source, to reshape the very thing you were trying to capture. This effect is not just philosophical, it's scientific. In physics, the observer effect shows that measuring a particle changes its state. Shine light on an electron to see where it is, and the energy of your measurement knocks it into another position. The data you record is not the untouched truth, but the altered version created by your interference. You did not just watch, you changed the outcome. The same holds true far beyond physics. Consider psychology. If you ask people about their habits, how often they exercise, what they eat, how they sleep, the act of asking alone can shift their behavior. A person who tracks their sleep may unconsciously begin sleeping differently, because the awareness of measurement influences the very pattern being measured. Self-reporting on diet often improves diet, not because of any intervention, but because the observation itself nudges choices. The presence of data collection mutates the data source. Think about businesses tracking workers. When employees know their keystrokes, calls, or hours are monitored, they don't act the way they would naturally. They adjust, working faster, hesitating less, avoiding certain actions, not to match reality, but to match the eye of measurement. The data being collected no longer reflects natural behavior. It reflects behavior under surveillance. The observer shapes the observed. Even in medicine, this distortion appears. Patients who know they are part of a study often experience what researchers call the Hawthorne effect. They change their routines simply because they are being observed. Their diets improve, their activity increases, their symptoms shift, not due to the treatment itself, but because of the awareness of scrutiny. The data looks promising, but it is not pure. It is already mutated by the process of collection. Digital technology magnifies this paradox to staggering proportions. Every click, every search, every interaction online is recorded as data. But the awareness that you are being tracked changes how you behave. You search differently, you share differently, you even think differently, adjusting your digital footprint to match what you imagine the algorithms are watching for. In this way, the very act of collecting data creates a feedback loop, where the source adjusts, the measurement shifts, and reality bends around the act of being recorded. The danger lies in how invisible this process feels. We imagine data as neutral, when in truth, it is always contaminated by its own collection. Numbers that look precise are not pure, they are echoes of behavior altered by the shadow of observation. The more we measure, the more we shape, until the original pattern can never be recovered. What we end up studying is not reality itself, but reality under the weight of measurement. And this leads to a haunting truth: every dataset is a distortion. The moment it is captured, the source has already shifted. The measurement changes the measured, and the feedback loop ensures that what you think you are learning is not untouched fact, but a mutation. To collect is to alter. To observe is to interfere. And in the end, the more faithfully we measure, the further we drift from the world as it was before the measuring began. So the next time you see numbers, charts, or statistics, ask yourself, what was changed in order for this data to exist? Because the truth may not be in the measurement at all, it may be in the distortion the measurement itself created. Partial view paradox. Imagine standing before a vast, intricate machine, a living system of gears and pulleys, wires and lights, all moving in perfect hidden balance. You cannot see the whole of it. You catch only a glimpse through a narrow window. You watch one wheel, one light, one gear, and because your gaze falls upon that part, the entire system begins to shift. It reorganizes itself, bends its rhythm, compensates for what is being observed. The result is that the part you see is no longer the part that truly was, and the rest of the machine reshapes itself in response to your incomplete attention. This is the partial view paradox, the unsettling truth that observing only part of a system can cause the unseen parts to reorganize, bending reality itself around the focus of your gaze. This happens in nature more than we realize. Consider an ecosystem, a forest teeming with plants, animals, soil, and air. A scientist may study only one species, perhaps a bird or an insect. But the act of focusing attention there changes how the ecosystem is understood and even how it behaves. Protecting that one species may cause others to flourish or to collapse, shifting the balance in unpredictable ways. The partial view does not simply record, it changes. The forest reacts to the incomplete gaze, reorganizing itself in ways that make the original whole unreachable. The observer's narrow window has rewritten reality. The same paradox plays out in human life. When a manager in a workplace observes only the productivity numbers, employees begin to reorganize their behavior around those numbers. They might appear more efficient on paper, but creativity, trust, and collaboration, unseen parts of the system, may decay. The system bends itself to fit the eye that is watching, and in doing so, the unseen truths dissolve. What is left is a distorted reflection, a reorganized whole shaped by partial scrutiny. The event becomes something new, not because the observer intervened, but because the gaze was incomplete. Think of relationships. When you focus only on a single behavior, someone's anger, someone's silence, someone's ambition, the rest of their being reorganizes around your attention. They become self-conscious, defensive, performative, altered. The unseen aspects of love, vulnerability, or complexity retreat into the shadows, shifting to balance the narrowed view you have chosen. The more partial your gaze, the more distorted the reality becomes. You are not seeing the person as they are, you are seeing a system reorganized around the one part you have decided to observe. This paradox echoes in science itself. In quantum mechanics, observing one property, like the position of a particle, destroys the clarity of another, like momentum. The system cannot present its whole truth when only one part is measured. It reorganizes, reshaping reality so that what you see is not the full picture, but a version bent around your partial gaze. It is as though the universe itself refuses to reveal its totality, punishing the observer with distortion for daring to look incompletely. Partial view paradox is not always destructive. It can also create. Focusing on a single note in music can cause the rest of the orchestra to shift in meaning, turning background into atmosphere, silence into rhythm. Framing one detail in art alters the canvas as a whole, reorganizing perception itself. But even here, what emerges is not the natural state. It is a new creation, born because attention was incomplete. The unseen reorganized to support the seen, and reality was transformed. The danger lies in mistaking the part for the whole. Histories are written from partial views, often focusing on battles and kings while neglecting farmers, mothers, and workers. Societies reorganize themselves around these narrow stories, erasing other truths until they seem invisible. What we inherit is not the reality of the past, but a reorganized system shaped by incomplete attention. Our memory of humanity is itself a partial view paradox, an edited truth that has remade the world. And so we must ask, how often are we living in realities bent around the parts we choose to see? When we fixate on money, status, or appearances, the rest of life reorganizes itself in the shadows, reshaping outcomes we never intended. When governments, corporations, or individuals look only at fragments of data, entire systems bend into strange, distorted shapes, hiding costs and consequences in unseen corners. The world we think we know may only be a version warped around the narrowness of our gaze. The paradox leaves us with a haunting truth. The act of seeing incompletely changes the whole. No system, no relationship, no reality remains untouched by partial observation. The unseen will always reorganize itself in response, making what we observe no longer what it truly was. Perhaps that is why mystery is essential, because the whole can never be held in sight, and every glance leaves the world forever altered. So the question remains, when you look at a part of the world, do you realize how much the rest is shifting in response? Do you know that every partial view leaves behind a ghost of the whole that will never exist again? Night Watcher Shift. Imagine the way silence thickens at night. Streets you walked freely in daylight feel heavier, almost alive. The shadows seem deeper, the air colder, the world less familiar. Nothing has truly changed. The pavement is the same, the buildings unchanged, but your perception has shifted entirely. This is the Night Watcher Shift, the strange transformation of reality caused by the psychological weight of being observed in darkness. At night, the mind fills in what the eyes cannot see. The unknown takes on presence. A movement in the corner of your vision becomes a threat. A flicker of sound, wind in the leaves, a door creaking, feels like evidence of eyes on you. The human brain evolved to treat darkness as a field of hidden observers, because in the ancestral past, it often was. Predators stalked at night, dangers concealed themselves in shadow. Our nervous system still carries that memory, so when daylight fades, your awareness sharpens. You feel watched, even when no one is there, and because of that feeling, you behave differently. Consider the difference between walking down a hallway at noon versus at midnight. In daylight, your steps are casual. At night, you become deliberate, cautious. Your posture changes, your breathing becomes shallow. In this altered state, the environment itself transforms. Corners become suspicious, shadows conceal imagined figures. You are no longer moving through a neutral space. You are moving through an invisible theater where the audience is unknown, perhaps imagined, but always felt. Psychologists describe this as hypervigilance, a survival mechanism heightened by darkness. But the Night Watcher Shift extends beyond instinct. It alters reality. Think of how cities change character at night. A lively plaza by day becomes tense, expectant. People move differently, speak differently, trust less easily. Surveillance cameras, streetlights, even the presence of other night walkers add to the effect. Observation under daylight feels neutral, almost safe. Observation under darkness feels loaded, charged, invasive. It changes not only how we act but how we interpret the world. Even in experiments, the presence of dim lighting has been shown to shift decision-making. People cheat more when lights are low, as if obscurity shields them from judgment. At the same time, people also act more guarded, more cautious, because they fear hidden watchers in the dark. The paradox is that darkness both liberates and restrains, depending on whether you imagine yourself hidden or exposed. Cultural myths have long reflected this. Ghosts, spirits, demons, they rarely appear in sunlight. They emerge in hours when observation feels most uncertain. Darkness turns the gaze into something more powerful, more supernatural. A rustle in the dark is not simply a sound, it is a presence. Whether real or not, it changes you. And when you change, so too does the reality you inhabit. This is why night feels alive in a way day never does. It is not the world that shifts, it is you, reshaped by the psychological gravity of unseen eyes. The darkness becomes a stage, and you, knowingly or not, perform differently. The invisible audience, whether real or imagined, pulls on your behavior, tightening or distorting it. In daylight, you exist. In darkness, you are observed, whether or not anyone is truly watching. So next time you step into the night and feel that pressure on your skin, know that you are walking inside the night watcher shift. The shadows don't merely conceal, they project. The silence doesn't simply rest, it listens. And the reality you inhabit is no longer fixed, but rewritten by the possibility of unseen watchers who may or may not exist. You are never the same person in darkness as you are in light, because the gaze of night is never neutral. Observer synchronization loop. There is a strange phenomenon that arises when two people watch the same thing, but do more than simply watch. They begin to watch not only the event, but also each other. Their perceptions feed back and forth, until reality itself bends into alignment with the act of being observed together. This is the observer synchronization loop, a condition where two minds, by influencing one another's awareness, begin generating identical versions of reality, as though their combined focus erases other possibilities. At first, it seems harmless. Two witnesses see the same unusual event, and they confirm it for each other. A flickering light in the sky, a strange figure in the distance, a peculiar coincidence. They each describe what they saw, and in doing so, their accounts converge. But the more they repeat it, the more their words sculpt their shared reality. Soon, their memories begin to match exactly, even in details they never originally noticed. The texture of the light, the shape of the figure, the rhythm of the coincidence, these things were once ambiguous, fluid, unstable. But through synchronization, the ambiguity collapses, leaving behind only one version, reinforced and amplified between them. This is the hidden danger of observation. Reality does not merely unfold before us, it is reconstructed in dialogue, in memory, in the silent feedback of recognition. When two observers enter into this loop, they stop perceiving independently. Instead, they merge into a single interpretive engine, filtering out all other possibilities. They begin creating identical versions of the world, not because that is what truly happened, but because that is what they have chosen, consciously or unconsciously, to see together. Think of the way rumors spread. A single uncertain detail, passed between two people, solidifies as they repeat it. "I think it looked like this," one says. "Yes, that's what I saw too," the other replies. And with every repetition, the fragile uncertainty is erased. By the time the story escapes their circle, it has hardened into certainty. The original reality is gone, replaced by the synchronized one. Now imagine that same process happening not just in words, but in the very act of perception itself. The brain, eager for coherence, adapts to what is being confirmed. Soon, each person isn't just agreeing with the other, they are actually perceiving in identical ways. They no longer remember what they truly saw, they remember what they were synchronized to. Psychologists have noticed this in group settings, where people watching the same event begin unconsciously aligning their recollections. A famous experiment demonstrated that witnesses of a staged accident reported details that matched their peers' testimonies, even when those details were false. The loop had overridden their raw memory. In extreme cases, this creates collective illusions. Two or more people lock into the same perception, amplifying and reinforcing each other until the illusion feels unshakably real. If one observer had been alone, the perception may have faded into doubt. But in the loop, it grows stronger, more undeniable, more permanent. The strangest implication is that the observer synchronization loop doesn't just alter memory, it alters reality as lived. When two people begin aligning their interpretations, they start making choices and taking actions consistent with that shared version of events. They act as though the synchronized perception is true, and in doing so, they make it true in its consequences. A shared belief in danger leads to real fear, real responses, real scars. A shared vision of hope leads to real effort, real collaboration, real outcomes. Reality may not care about their interpretation, but their lives bend around it, ensuring that the synchronized version becomes the one that matters. This is why history is often written in loops. Two observers, or two groups, confirm each other until their synchronized narrative becomes the official truth. Competing versions vanish, not because they were false, but because they failed to lock into the loop. Over time, the dominant perception becomes indistinguishable from reality itself. It no longer matters what actually happened, only what was synchronized into existence. And yet, there is something eerie about this. Imagine two people staring into the night sky. They see a strange object hovering. One says it must be a satellite. The other agrees. From that moment on, that is what it was for both of them, even if it was something else entirely. Their synchronization closes the loop, sealing away all other explanations. Now imagine a different night, where two observers see the same thing, but this time one whispers, "It's not a satellite, it's something watching us." The other agrees, and from that moment on, that is the version of reality they carry forward. Two different loops, two different realities, shaped by the fragile instant of agreement. The actual truth remains unknown, buried beneath the synchronized layers. The loop is comforting, because it provides certainty. You no longer carry the burden of doubt alone. You share it with another, and together you make it solid. But comfort comes at a price. In synchronizing with another's perception, you surrender the multiplicity of reality. You stop seeing what else might have been. You stop noticing the unstable edges, the contradictions, the possibilities. The loop doesn't just confirm, it reduces. It compresses reality into a narrow stream, where only one version survives. Perhaps this is why some mysteries resist resolution. They thrive only when left unsynchronized, when each observer carries a slightly different perception. The moment consensus forms, the mystery dies, because the loop has chosen its truth. And perhaps this is why some experiences feel deeply personal, even when shared. Two people may watch the same sunset, but unless they fall into perfect synchronization, their realities remain distinct. They occupy neighboring worlds, close but not identical, each carrying their own truth of what was seen. The observer synchronization loop raises an unsettling question. If two people can lock themselves into an identical version of reality, what happens when entire societies do the same? If billions of observers synchronize to a single story of the world, does that story become the only reality we can live in? And if so, how many other realities have we erased by simply agreeing too much? In the end, this loop reminds us that perception is not just about what you see, it's about who you see it with and how your awareness reflects and amplifies theirs. Reality is fragile, pliable, shaped not only by solitary observation but by the endless feedback of shared recognition. Every nod, every agreement, every confirmation strengthens one version and weakens the rest. And as the loop tightens, the observers cease to be two individuals. They become a single witness, echoing the same truth, locked inside the same constructed world. Observation overlap effect. Imagine a single observer, standing in silence, gazing at the world. Their perception bends reality in subtle ways, collapsing possibilities into one chosen path. But now imagine more than one observer, eyes overlapping, minds converging, attention pooling in a single moment. The reality that emerges under this combined gaze is not merely an average of their perspectives. It is something new, something neither would have created alone. This is the observation overlap effect, the haunting idea that when multiple consciousnesses focus together, reality itself reshapes into a shared truth, a version of the world that exists only because they witnessed it simultaneously. We already know that observation is not passive. In quantum experiments, particles behave differently when measured. The act of watching forces outcomes. But what happens when 2 or 2 billion minds are watching at once? Does the collapse of possibilities become stronger? Does the universe bend more sharply under the weight of collective awareness? Perhaps every individual gaze writes one draft of reality, but when those gazes overlap, the drafts merge, solidifying into a single version that becomes history. History itself gives us examples. A small event unnoticed may fade away, forgotten, unanchored in time. But the same event, witnessed by thousands, becomes fixed, undeniable, part of the fabric of the world. A protest, a speech, a tragedy. Once seen collectively, it transforms into something larger than the moment itself. In this sense, the crowd does not just record reality. It co-creates it. Without the witnesses, the event would dissolve into possibility. With them, it hardens into fact. This extends to culture, too. Myths, religions, and national stories are born not from solitary visions, but from overlapping observation. One person claims to see a miracle, but it is only when many affirm it, share it, and witness together that it becomes a lasting reality. The overlap of attention forges permanence. Belief shared by millions becomes truth, regardless of its origin. Reality is less about what occurred than about how many minds agreed they saw it. There is also a darker implication. If overlapping observation creates shared realities, then those realities may differ depending on which group is watching. The same event may exist in different forms across different clusters of consciousness. One group sees liberation, another sees disaster. One group sees truth, another sees lies. Each overlapping set of observers hardens their own version of reality, and the universe fractures into competing truths, each real to those who witness together. And yet, there is something awe-inspiring here. When many observe the same star, the same ritual, the same unfolding of time, they are not just looking outward. They are weaving a collective world. Their overlapping gaze becomes a lens through which reality itself is sculpted. What you believe you saw alone may be fragile, but what we see together becomes eternal. The observation overlap effect suggests that consciousness is not isolated, it is collaborative. Every shared glance, every collective witness, is an act of creation, bending the universe into a form it could never have taken in solitude. So the next time you stand among others, looking at the same scene, consider this: you are not merely watching together. You are forging reality together. Your overlapping awareness is a weight the universe cannot ignore. And in that moment, the world before you is not just observed, it is created. Collapse prevention phenomenon. Imagine standing before something fragile, an idea, an event, a structure, that feels like it's about to collapse. You can almost hear the tension in the air, like a rope ready to snap. Yet strangely, the moment you look at it, the collapse pauses. The act of observation itself seems to suspend the unraveling, as if your awareness is an invisible scaffold, holding reality together for just a little longer. This is the collapse prevention phenomenon, the eerie sense that attention itself delays decay. Science brushes close to this mystery in quantum physics. There is what's called the quantum Zeno effect, where unstable particles, normally prone to decay, can have their collapse delayed simply by being measured repeatedly. The act of observation freezes them, preventing the natural unfolding of their end. It sounds impossible. Watching keeps something alive, but experiments confirm it. In the strange rules of quantum reality, awareness has power not just to record but to preserve. Now stretch this idea into the human world. Think of memory. Families hold on to fading traditions, not because the traditions are strong, but because they are remembered, spoken of, observed. The moment no one pays attention, the custom dies. But as long as it is witnessed, even by a few, the collapse is postponed. The observation becomes the anchor. Or take psychological experiments where performance changes under observation. A person struggling on a task may sharpen their focus when they know they are being watched. What might have ended in failure lingers into success. Even in medicine, patients who are monitored more closely often experience better outcomes, sometimes regardless of treatment. Observation itself slows decline, as if awareness has weight. Consider history. Entire buildings, monuments, even nations endure longer when they are observed, recorded, and studied. A neglected ruin crumbles fast, but the same ruin under the gaze of tourists, scholars, and caretakers resists collapse. Attention acts like preservation. To be seen is to survive. But there is a paradox buried here. Observation may delay collapse, but it cannot stop it forever. Like a candle burning slower under careful watch, the flame is still finite. Awareness stretches time, but it does not grant immortality. The very act of holding something in place creates tension, and eventually, when the gaze is gone, collapse rushes in with even greater force. This leads to haunting questions. How much of what we call endurance is simply the effect of being observed? Do we unknowingly keep people, traditions, or systems alive by paying attention to them? And when our awareness shifts elsewhere, how much collapses quietly, vanishing not from lack of strength but from lack of witness? So perhaps the act of observation is not passive at all. It is a force, subtle yet real, that bends the lifespan of the things we watch. Every look you give, every memory you hold, every attention you grant becomes a thread suspending collapse. And maybe, in ways we barely understand, the simple fact of seeing something is enough to keep it alive just a little longer than it was meant to be. Thought-influenced decay. Imagine you leave an apple on the counter, untouched, forgotten. Its skin shrivels slowly, its flesh darkens, time doing its quiet work. Now imagine the same apple under constant watch, your eyes lingering on it each day. Sometimes you dread its rot, sometimes you will it to last longer, sometimes you simply marvel at its transformation. Strangely, the rate of its decay feels different, as if the act of observing with thought and emotion bends the timeline of its breakdown. This is thought-influenced decay, the unsettling idea that when we focus on deterioration, our perception and intention can alter its speed, accelerating or slowing the process depending on the emotional weight we attach. Across human experience, decay is never neutral. Think about flowers. Left unnoticed, they wilt quietly in a vase. But when you check on them constantly, willing them to stay fresh for a special occasion, they seem to collapse faster, as if your anxious gaze hastens their decline. Conversely, when you surround them with joy and celebration, they appear to hold their bloom longer, resisting the fall. Is this only perception? Or is the emotional current of our observation feeding into the rhythm of their decay, subtly reorganizing the process itself? Science touches on this paradox. In quantum experiments, unstable particles sometimes appear to decay more slowly when observed, a phenomenon known as the quantum Zeno effect. Watch a fragile system closely, and its collapse is delayed. Yet in other contexts, observation accelerates breakdown. Heat, stress, and psychological fixation can drive processes faster, as if attention itself injects energy into the system. The observer is not outside of decay, but entangled with it, shaping its rate by the quality of thought and emotion applied. Consider the human body. Stress, fear, and hopelessness can make aging appear to speed up, weakening immunity and hastening decline. Yet care, love, and calm attention often extend vitality. Patients who feel watched over with compassion tend to heal faster, while those observed with cold detachment may deteriorate. The decay of the body does not happen in a vacuum. It bends to the emotional context in which it is observed. Even medical science records this as placebo and nocebo effects, but beneath those labels is a deeper truth. Thought and gaze guide the rhythm of breakdown. Even objects seem to bend around the current of observation. A treasured heirloom cared for lovingly is polished, restored, and preserved, seemingly defying age. The same object left in a dusty attic, thought of only with neglect, collapses into ruin. The difference is not just material conditions, but the thought field around it. Attention shapes action, action shapes environment, and the rate of decay is altered. The apple, the flower, the heirloom, all dissolve along paths carved by how they are seen. And what of memory? When we revisit moments of loss, our recollections themselves decay differently depending on how we think about them. A painful memory revisited with grief rots quickly, becoming heavy, distorted, toxic. But the same memory revisited with tenderness or acceptance seems to stabilize, its breakdown slowed, preserved as something sacred rather than lost. Thought influences the decay not just of matter, but of time, shaping what endures and what disintegrates in the mind. This paradox forces us to confront a haunting possibility. Decay is not a passive process, but a dance between matter, time, and consciousness. What we watch and how we watch it changes the rhythm of its dissolution. Nothing simply falls apart in isolation. It falls apart in relation to the eyes and minds that witness it. The apple, the flower, the body, the memory. Each is entangled with the emotional gaze that surrounds it, and its pace of breakdown is forever altered. So ask yourself, when you watch something fade, are you accelerating its collapse with fear and dread, or are you slowing its unraveling with care and presence? Thought may not prevent decay, but it shapes the path it takes. And perhaps in that shaping lies our quiet power, to bend the rhythm of endings, to decide whether what we watch will wither quickly into ruin, or linger just a little longer under the weight of our gaze. Double focus paradox. Imagine your eyes trying to hold two worlds at once. A concert stage and the restless crowd. A child playing and the storm clouds rolling overhead. A screen in one hand, a conversation in the other. The moment your attention divides, reality itself begins to distort. Neither event remains pure. Each bends under the weight of shared observation, fusing into a hybrid that could never exist if viewed alone. This is the double focus paradox. When watching two events at once changes them both, creating a third reality stitched from fragments of the first two. Attention is not a neutral tool. It is an active force. Neuroscience shows that when you divide focus, your brain doesn't simply split evenly. It stitches together competing signals into a distorted picture, altering how each is experienced. If you watch a film while reading a message, the film is no longer the same film. It becomes an incomplete echo. The message is no longer the same message. It is colored by the soundtrack of the film playing in the background. Both realities warp into one hybrid, a ghostly overlap that would never have existed separately. This happens everywhere. In classrooms, a student who listens while scrolling doesn't learn two things. They create a strange hybrid reality where neither is fully retained. At work, an employee on a call while watching emails doesn't experience the call or the inbox in their original form. They experience a third version, one defined by distraction. The paradox is that by doubling focus, you don't expand reality. You collapse it into something untrue to either source. Consider quantum parallels. In physics, observation collapses possibilities. In the double-slit experiment, particles behave differently when measured. But what happens when two measurements compete? The wave of probability distorts further, as though the universe itself struggles to reconcile divided attention. On the human scale, divided observation is the same collapse, two events altered, neither preserved in its original truth. The paradox deepens in relationships. Think of a conversation where you are half present, eyes flicking between the person in front of you and the device in your hand. They feel it. Their tone shifts, their openness retracts. Your divided gaze changes their behavior. At the same time, the device, the message, the social feed, feels less vivid, diminished by the shadow of the human presence beside you. Both interactions alter because both are being half-watched. A third reality emerges, one of muted connection and diluted truth. Artists have long experimented with this. Overlapping sounds, fractured imagery, dual narratives, all evoke the tension of divided focus. In doing so, they expose the fragility of perception. You cannot hold two full realities at once. You can only create a hybrid reality, fragmented, incomplete, uncanny. The world you think you're seeing is already a distortion shaped by your own act of observation. But here is the haunting truth. Every moment of divided focus erases what might have been. The original versions of those events no longer exist for you. They are ghosts, displaced by the hybrid you accidentally created. The concert wasn't just the music, it was the music bent by your awareness of the restless crowd. The storm wasn't just thunder, it was thunder blurred by the child's laughter. Every act of double focus becomes a subtle corruption of reality, and the paradox ensures you never experience either event in its authentic form again. So next time you find yourself torn between two visions, remember, you are not simply splitting attention, you are altering reality. Each observation changes the other, weaving them into something unnatural, a third path that never belonged to either. That is the double focus paradox, the proof that you cannot observe without reshaping, and that to watch two things at once is to create a ghostly hybrid, a fragile reality that would never exist if you had chosen just one. Ripple backward effect. There is an idea that unsettles the very way we think about time itself, that what we do in the present might ripple backward, shaping conditions in the past. This is the ripple backward effect, a paradox where observation today seems to reach into yesterday, rewriting details that should have already been fixed. At first, it sounds impossible. The past is supposed to be finished, sealed, untouchable. But there are moments, rare, fleeting, uncanny, that hint at something stranger, where the timeline behaves as though it is still flexible, even behind us. Imagine discovering a memory you are certain never existed before, yet suddenly it feels like it always has. You read about a scientific experiment or a hidden piece of history, and though it is brand new knowledge to you in this moment, a strange familiarity creeps in, as though some part of your past self already knew. Or consider the experience of a déjà vu that doesn't just mirror the present, but retroactively colors events that happened earlier in the day, making them feel scripted, foreshadowed, almost planned. It is as if your current awareness casts a shadow backward, creating the illusion that the past was preparing for this moment all along. In physics, there are thought experiments that tease this possibility. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that particles behave differently depending on measurements that have not yet been made. The famous delayed choice experiments show that the way we choose to observe something now can change how it appears to have behaved earlier in time. A photon seems to decide its past based on an observation that happens in its future. This is not science fiction. It is one of the strange truths of quantum behavior. The ripple backward effect isn't just poetic metaphor. It is hinted at in the mathematics of the smallest pieces of reality. And what happens in the quantum world often leaks, in strange symbolic ways, into our lived world. People sometimes report that their present awareness seems to reconfigure old memories. You look back at an earlier event and find details that were never clear before suddenly taking on new meaning. Was the meaning always there, hidden and waiting? Or did your current observation ripple backward, altering the way the past now exists in your mind? Memory is not a static archive. It is rewritten every time you recall it, reshaped by your present state. In this way, your current observation genuinely changes your past, not the external events, but the internal record of them. And if your internal record is the only access you truly have to the past, then in a very real sense, your present moment does rewrite history. Think of the way a plot twist in a story changes everything you've already read. Suddenly, old scenes take on new significance, as if they were written differently all along. But the story hasn't changed. You have. Your current awareness ripples backward, restructuring the meaning of earlier chapters. Life often works the same way. A sudden revelation, a betrayal, a discovery, or even a loss changes not just the future but the way you interpret the past. Whole relationships look different. Whole years of your life acquire new textures. You feel as though time itself has been rewritten from behind you. The unsettling possibility is that this is not just psychological, but fundamental. Perhaps the timeline is not a straight road we walk but a liquid surface, disturbed by every step we take. The present does not sit neatly after the past. It pushes ripples in both directions, bending what is ahead and what is behind. What you know today alters what yesterday becomes. What you observe now shapes how the past must have been arranged in order to lead here. The past is not erased, but it is reconfigured, like a puzzle whose pieces rearrange themselves every time you look at the finished picture. This idea also appears in strange coincidences. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they suddenly call you. Retroactively, you wonder if your thoughts summoned them, or if, somehow, the event was already in motion and your present awareness rippled backward, planting the thought before the call arrived. Or you stumble across a concept you never knew, and hours later you discover it was about to become crucial in your life. The knowledge feels like it reached you before its time, bending the earlier hours of your day to align with a future event. But there is a danger in this way of thinking. If the past can be shaped by the present, then how can we ever trust what has already happened? If memory is fluid, if history is pliable, then certainty becomes an illusion. Perhaps all of history is a shifting field, restructured every moment by new acts of observation. Perhaps yesterday is not a stable archive but a constantly rewritten draft. The idea is terrifying, because it means the ground behind us is as unstable as the ground ahead. We are not walking on a solid line of time but balancing on ripples, waves that spread outward in both directions from the fragile point of now. Still, the ripple backward effect carries a strange kind of comfort. It suggests that nothing is ever final, even the past. A mistake, a loss, a wound you believed was carved forever into your story might still change in meaning tomorrow. Your current awareness can soften it, reshape it, ripple backward and alter its place in your life. The past cannot be undone, but it can be reinterpreted until it becomes something else entirely. This means your story is never finished. Even the earliest chapters are still alive, still shifting under the influence of the present moment. So when you think of your own history, remember this: every glance you take now is rewriting what came before. Every new awareness casts ripples backward, altering the texture of memory, reshaping the conditions of your past. You are not just a product of yesterday, you are also its author, editing it in real time with the choices you make today. The past is not frozen, it is liquid. And each observation you make now spreads across its surface like a stone dropped in water, changing what you once thought was unchangeable. Directional gaze distortion. Imagine standing at a crossroads, still and silent, with countless paths stretching out before you. The air is heavy with possibility. In that moment, reality has not yet chosen its form. It hovers in suspension, waiting. And then you turn your head. Your eyes fix in one direction. It feels like a small gesture, something meaningless. But beneath the surface, something immense happens. By looking left instead of right, you do not just see a different view, you call forth a different version of reality. This is the unsettling idea of the directional gaze distortion, that the angle of your awareness decides which world solidifies, as though existence itself unfolds along the axis of your sight. Quantum physics whispers this possibility. In experiments, the way we choose to measure a particle determines the property it reveals. Look for position, and you get position. Look for momentum, and you get momentum. What you seek is what you summon. In the same way, perhaps every turn of the head is not merely a change of scenery but a fork in reality's branching path. To look north is to collapse one universe. To look east is to collapse another. The choice is invisible, hidden in the everyday rhythm of glances, but beneath it lies the architecture of destiny. Consider memory. Think back to a moment of chance, a crowded station, a busy street. You looked in one direction and caught someone's eye, and your life shifted, a friendship formed, a love began, an opportunity appeared. Had you turned your gaze elsewhere, that entire timeline would have vanished. To you, it feels like coincidence. To reality, it was collapse. The directional gaze distortion suggests that life is built not only on decisions of action, but on decisions of sight, where you chose to look, and what worlds were born from that looking. History itself trembles under this effect. A soldier glances left and sees a signal, changing the course of a battle. A scientist, scanning instruments, notices one flicker instead of another, and a discovery is made. A leader sees one crowd's anger and not another's despair, and an entire nation tilts. Which way the gaze falls alters the story that follows, not because the world changed first, but because the gaze summoned the version of the world that would change. And then there is the haunting personal dimension. How many versions of your life have already dissolved because you did not look? How many futures crumbled quietly the moment your eyes turned elsewhere? Every missed glance is a universe discarded. Every gaze held too long is a world solidified. The act feels so small, yet the weight is cosmic. You are not just a witness, you are a sculptor. Your eyes carve out one timeline at the expense of infinite others. So the next time you turn your head, pause. Recognize that reality is waiting for your direction. The universe does not unfold independently of your gaze. It bends to it, aligns with it, and emerges where you choose to look. Direction is not just orientation. It is creation. Which way you look is which world is born. And once the gaze has fallen, there is no going back. That universe is yours, and all others are gone. Storytelling reality imprint. Imagine watching something unfold in silence. A street performer plays a song, a storm gathers in the distance, a child builds a tower of blocks. In the stillness of observation, reality moves as it was meant to, untouched by language. But now begin to describe it out loud. The music swells, the storm darkens, the child's tower grows taller. With every word, you notice new details, emphasize others, and shift your focus. The performer, hearing your narration, may play differently. The child, sensing your commentary, may move more carefully. Even the storm feels transformed, because your mind is now weaving it into a story rather than letting it exist freely. This is the storytelling reality imprint, the strange phenomenon where narrating what you see in real time bends the event itself, fusing your words into its unfolding. The effect seems harmless, even invisible, but it is profound. Sports commentators describe a player as confident, and suddenly the crowd believes it, the player absorbs it, and their performance subtly changes. A reporter describing a protest as peaceful or chaotic reshapes how participants act in the moment. Language is not passive. It becomes part of the system it describes. The words slip inside the flow of reality, guiding outcomes, redirecting the path of events. What was once observation becomes intervention. Think of children again. A parent watching a child draw may narrate, "That's a beautiful tree you're making." The child, who may have intended no tree at all, begins to see their lines differently, adjusts them, leans into the suggestion. The drawing that emerges is no longer the drawing that would have been. The story has altered the creation, imprinting itself into the art. The act of describing did not just reflect reality, it changed it. In science, This imprint can be dangerous. A researcher observing animals might describe them in anthropomorphic terms, calling one cautious, another aggressive. Those words shape how others interpret the behavior, which shapes how future studies are designed. The description becomes part of the system of knowledge, steering what is noticed and what is ignored. The words linger as fingerprints on reality, distorting not just the record, but the event itself as it unfolds under the weight of narration. Even history is marked by this imprint. Battles, revolutions, and disasters were not just lived but described as they happened. Eyewitnesses gave words to chaos, and those words became part of the moment's reality, shaping how others reacted and how future generations would remember. A panicked cry of fire can cause more destruction than the flames themselves. A shouted declaration of victory can end a battle before swords are lowered. Storytelling in real time fuses itself into the event, blurring the line between what happened and what was spoken into happening. On a personal level, this effect shapes our memories. Narrating your own life, telling yourself, "I am strong, I am unlucky, I am lost," causes your future actions to align with those words. You imprint reality as you describe it, altering what paths open and which close. Words are not afterthoughts. They are living threads woven into the event. By narrating your story, you are not just remembering your life, you are rewriting it as you live. Consider social media, where countless lives are narrated in real time. A person describes their meal, their relationship, their journey, and the act of description bends the experience itself. Dinner becomes a performance for the caption. A trip becomes material for a post. The story reshapes the reality, until the two are inseparable. The imprint of storytelling is not just personal, it becomes collective, defining how entire cultures live, perceive, and remember themselves. This imprint carries danger. Words spoken hastily can trap reality in frames it never needed. Call someone a failure in the moment, and they may step into that role. Call an event doomed, and people may behave in ways that ensure its collapse. But it also carries power. Call someone brave, and they may rise into courage. Call a moment sacred, and it may transform into something unforgettable. Storytelling is never neutral. It is a spell we cast on the present, a subtle manipulation of the unfolding now. The paradox is haunting. We cannot escape language, yet language forever alters what it touches. To describe is to interfere, to narrate is to reshape. Every word spoken in the present moment imprints itself on the flow of reality, weaving itself into outcomes that would not have existed otherwise. The street performer, the storm, the child, all were changed, however slightly, by the story laid over them. So the question becomes, when you describe the world, are you aware of the power your words carry? Do you realize that you are not just telling the story of what is happening, but changing what is happening as you speak? Perhaps this is the ultimate imprint, that every narration is a quiet rewriting of reality, and the world we inherit is never what it would have been, but always what we have spoken it into becoming. Experimenter's handprint. Imagine a scientist setting up an experiment, believing they are only measuring, only recording, only revealing truth. They adjust the instruments, set the parameters, control the environment, and yet the very act of testing has already changed the outcome. The system knows it is under trial, and it bends. The organism adapts, the subject performs, the particle behaves in ways it never would outside of the test. This is the experimenter's handprint, the invisible mark left on every event when it is studied, the unavoidable distortion caused not by bias or error, but by the mere presence of examination itself. Think about animals in captivity. A mouse running through a maze to find food is not behaving as a wild mouse would. It is solving a puzzle built by human hands, inside a box, under conditions that will never exist in the real world. The results may reveal intelligence, memory, or learning, but what they do not reveal is the true nature of the mouse in its own habitat. The handprint of the experimenter has forced the animal into a different reality, and the data collected is not about what would have been, but about what the test created. This effect echoes in human studies too. When a person knows they are being tested, their performance shifts. Students may freeze on exams despite mastering the material, because the structure of the test alters their mental state. Patients in clinical trials sometimes improve simply because they are observed and cared for, not because the treatment works. Athletes may push harder in labs than on fields, or collapse under artificial conditions that never appear in their natural flow of play. In every case, the test does not capture reality, it rewrites it. What is measured is not what exists in the wild, but what exists under the shadow of testing. Even in physics, where we imagine cold objectivity, the handprint is undeniable. Quantum mechanics reveals particles that behave differently once observed, collapsing into defined states only when forced by measurement. The test itself alters the particle's destiny. The handprint here is not metaphorical, it is woven into the laws of reality. To measure is to interfere, to study is to distort, to test is to transform. The clean truth we imagine is always smeared with the fingerprints of the observer. History is filled with examples where this paradox has warped our understanding. Early anthropologists studying isolated cultures altered the rituals and behaviors of the very people they sought to document. The presence of cameras and notebooks shifted traditions, performances became exaggerated, and ways of life adapted to the gaze of the outsider. The records we call history are often nothing more than distorted reflections of this handprint, fragments of a reality that ceased to exist the moment it was tested. But the experimenter's handprint is not always destructive. Sometimes it creates entirely new realities that would never have existed otherwise. A stress test on a bridge forces engineers to learn its limits, knowledge that reshapes construction and safety. A trial of a new medicine may alter patient outcomes in the short term, but in doing so, reveals hidden pathways that lead to future cures. The handprint bends truth, but in its bending, it carves new possibilities, new paths that could not have been found otherwise. And yet, there is something haunting here. If every test reshapes reality, then the truth we seek is always elusive. What would the mouse have done without the maze? What would the student have remembered without the pressure of grades? What would the particle have been if we had not forced it to reveal itself? These questions point toward a void, a world of truths forever hidden because our touch has erased them. The natural behavior, the untouched path, the unmeasured state, they dissolve the instant we try to grasp them. Perhaps the most unsettling part of the experimenter's handprint is that it extends far beyond science. In daily life, whenever we probe, whenever we test, we alter. Ask a child to show me how you draw, and their doodle changes into performance. Ask a friend, how honest can you be, and their words bend to the test. Even in relationships, the act of questioning becomes a test that alters the behavior it was meant to reveal. The handprint is everywhere, in classrooms, workplaces, governments, even in love. So what do we do, knowing that every attempt to measure distorts? Perhaps the answer is humility. To remember that what we record is never pure truth, but truth under trial. To recognize that the handprint is always there, smudging the glass between us and reality. And to ask ourselves, are we willing to accept that the world we study is not the world as it is, but the world as it becomes under the pressure of our tests? The experimenter's handprint is unavoidable. It is the shadow of inquiry itself, the cost of knowledge, the distortion sewn into every attempt to understand. What we learn may be useful, may even be beautiful, but it is never untouched. And the haunting question remains, what realities have we lost forever, erased by the very tests that tried to reveal them? Weather watcher shift. Imagine a farmer standing in an open field, eyes fixed on the horizon, scanning the skies for signs of rain. Or a scientist staring at storm data, tracking winds, humidity, and pressure with relentless attention. In those moments, something strange seems to stir. Weather itself feels different when watched. The clouds seem to hesitate, storms seem to shift their paths, rain delays just long enough to tease expectation. This is the weather watcher shift, the paradoxical sense that weather patterns subtly change under the weight of prolonged human observation. At first glance, it seems impossible. Weather is governed by physics, not by eyes. Yet consider how deeply observation changes outcomes in other realms. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently under measurement. In psychology, people shift behavior when they know they are being watched. Extend that idea outward. If observation can change the smallest units of matter and the subtlest layers of human action, why would weather be entirely immune? The moment we observe, we alter context. Take meteorology. Before the age of constant satellites, weather was wild, unpredictable. Now, we track it with global networks of sensors, eyes in orbit, supercomputers modeling every gust of wind. And yet, even with all this scrutiny, weather still surprises us. Forecasts shift at the last moment, storms defy predictions, rainfall comes hours later or earlier than expected. Some argue this is not mere chaos, but an emergent effect of attention itself. The very act of monitoring introduces subtle distortions, like a feedback loop between observer and environment. Think about the psychological experience. When you stare long enough at the sky, waiting for rain, your perception shifts. A delay feels longer, a drizzle feels heavier, a gust of wind feels like a sign. You are no longer just watching weather. You are co-authoring its meaning. And when thousands or millions collectively track a storm, watching radar loops and satellite feeds, the storm becomes something else entirely. It is not just a natural event. It is a performance under human attention, shaped by the tension between what is expected and what unfolds. History is filled with stories where observation and weather intertwine. Soldiers waiting for storms to cover their movement. Pilots watching cloud patterns before flight. Cultures performing rituals of rainmaking, convinced that watching and calling to the skies could bend them. Were they only imagining influence? Or is it possible that attention, collective and focused, does ripple outward, nudging probability in subtle ways? Even science admits uncertainty. Weather systems are chaotic. Small inputs, tiny changes, can cascade into massive effects. The famed butterfly effect reminds us that the flap of wings in one place can seed a storm in another. Human observation itself, whether through measurements, interventions, or expectations, may be another flap in that chain. A shift in how predictions are made changes how people act. How people act changes the environment feeds back into the storm. Thus, the weather watcher shift may not be supernatural at all, but an inevitable loop between our gaze and the forces we watch. And here lies the haunting paradox. The more we watch weather, the less certain it becomes. Observation magnifies unpredictability. The act of trying to fix its course in our minds seems to loosen its anchor. We never see weather as it truly is. We see it in relation to how much attention we place on it. A storm unobserved is simply a storm. A storm watched by millions becomes a phenomenon charged with expectation, distortion, and mystery. So the next time you find yourself staring at the sky, waiting for clouds to break or storms to pass, remember this: your gaze is not passive. You are part of the unfolding. The weather you think you are watching is also watching you back, adjusting under the invisible gravity of observation. That is the weather watcher shift, a reminder that even the most untamable forces of nature are never entirely free from the influence of human eyes.